Good evening, council members.
Good evening.
I'm here again to inform you about our next events. We only got 5 minutes. I'm gonna let them do the talking, and I'm gonna hand you this. Mayor, I gave you some stuff to sign. I need it before Sunday, so I'll be at your office tomorrow.
Okay, thank
All
you.
right.
My reputation precedes me, I guess.
Mount Olive Cemetery Historical Preservation Society has big plans for Make a Difference Day on Saturday, October 24th of this year. There are 4 projects. It's going to be like a progressive dinner of service projects. In the morning, there will be cleanup at the Mount Olive Cemetery. In the early afternoon, there will be an awards assembly for an essay contest where young people honor military spouses. In the later afternoon, there will be a dinner honoring grandparents raising their grandchildren. And then in the evening, there will be a dance for honoring military spouses.
Got another minute. And we're selling T-shirts, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Looks like a good $100 from you all, from the city council. And then the tickets are $25 each for the dance. It's a USO style dance. There will be no food served. It will be back in the 40s. Hopefully it will be held at Fort Campbell, and hopefully we'll have a military band, and well, hopefully you all will come. If you don't come, just buy a ticket. Okay? Say yes or something.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Geneva. Geneva, I am surprised you didn't take your whole 5 minutes.
I did know them.
No, we're done though. You've already you missed the opportunity. Miss Christine Pasick.
Hello and good evening to everybody. Some of you know me from being around town. Some of you may or may not know that I recently started a new endeavor through SannaBlue Media Solutions. We looked at the public relations for the community and the growth that's happening in the community, and we realized that in every city except Clarksville there is a business magazine that showcases the community. And now Clarksville does have a business magazine. We have published Business Clarksville, and tonight we wanted to make sure that all of you have copies of the magazine. It's our introductory issue, and we hope that you'll look at it and enjoy it and begin to support it. It is a great method by which we can showcase the community of Clarksville, and we are on the grow, unlike many other cities in the country. We are also going to be doing an Arts and Heritage magazine that will debut on October 15th, and it will be the same type of format, high gloss, and that will showcase the culture, arts, and heritage of our entire region. So I do hope you'll take a good look at it and that you will enjoy it and pick up copies as they come out in the future. And we do have it by subscription. It's going to be available at a number of local outlets. Many of the downtown stores already carry it. Places out in Sango, up off Wilbur Rudolph Boulevard, and it's definitely by subscription. Turner McCullough is working on it with us, and our publisher is actually David Shelton, and we also have Kurt Davis as an author and writer with us. So we're hoping to have a long, good relationship with the city of Clarksville with this.
Before we go, to show and emphasize our intent of supporting local business, the Blue Note in Sango, Hodgepodge Artifacts, Metaphysicals, Ingredients, Rogates. These are the retailers who are selling our magazine and getting the word out. And tomorrow, our magazine is being debuted in East Tennessee to let them know that Clarksville and Montgomery County is joining the big boys in business. Thank you.
And I just wanted to say one real quick thing. We want your support as the leaders and the elected leaders in Clarksville. We appreciate everything you guys do. We want to work with you all any way that we can. Christine and Turner have just done an incredible job putting this together, and I also want to give a shout out to Jostens who printed this. So this is a local production 100% all the way through. So we want to support our local economy, want to report on that local economy, and we need your help to do that. So please tell your friends. As a matter of fact, I'm going to pass a second copy around for all of you. So Attorney Waback already told me to give out 2 business cards. Well, I'm going to give you 2 magazines, okay? So I would like for you guys just to pass these on to your friends, your colleagues, and to tell people about it. And that's one of the few times you actually got to see me in a suit, okay? So those of you that know me know that. But please, just tell your friend and just pass these around. And I would also like to give a complimentary copy to everybody in this room. We want to get this word out, and we want
Thanks,
everybody
Tom.
to know
Yes,
that
thank
Business
you.
of Clarksville is on the scene, and we are here to make an impression on all of you. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. I want to commend you on the quality of your
Thank you.
product here.
Thank you
Very
very much.
nice. There is one picture in here that I'd like to make the public aware of, and also that I'm not sure it benefited you, but I see Bill Summers and James Lewis look pretty rough on that river. Did you see that, Bill? That's the council boat, and congratulations on a good job on the council boat, Bill.
Because we were the only two workers.
Oh, you are? It's about halfway down.
The Riverfest page?
Riverfest, yes, sir. It's, very nice, but your quality is just really, really nice, and we certainly wish you great success.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Mr. Bill Harding.
Mr. Mayor, City Council members, my name is Bill Harding. I am the Community Ambassador for an organization called StopChildTraffickingNow.org. The reason I came to this opportunity is because I am here to tell you about an issue that many people that I've confronted in this city have no knowledge about. And I'd like to read a press release from Nathan Wilson of the Project Meridian Foundation that came out yesterday. Never before in the history of modern humanity have there been so many victims forced into sex trafficking. The numbers are staggering. It is estimated that revenue of over $34 billion is produced each year by human trafficking, and that 80% of this revenue comes from the sex trade. 2 to 4 million new trafficked victims are engulfed in this horror annually, of which 1 million American children in the United States between the ages of 11 and 17, and as young as 6 months, have been forced into the sex trade and are trafficked across state lines. It is often thought that human trafficking is mainly an international problem. However, the statistics sadly show that the human trafficking industry is firmly rooted in the United States. Gangs in New York, California, Texas, and Virginia, and other states in the United States kidnap and enslave girls between the ages of 11 and 17 for the purposes of forced prostitution and traffic them across state lines. Stop Child Trafficking Now has chosen to form a bold new approach, one that addresses the demand side of child sex trafficking by targeting buyers and predators for prosecution and conviction. SCT Now has launched a national campaign to raise money for retired elite military operatives targeting the demand side of trafficking. These special operative teams gather information on child predators both in the U.S. and abroad, information that will be used to convict child sex buyers. These operatives use the skills developed in the War on Terror in this war to bring down predators. Professional law enforcement have vetted this strategy and are eager to work with these operative teams once funding is secure. The efforts of a single operative team will do more to save children than millions of dollars put towards rescuing victims. A predator pays as little as $25 for 15 minutes of sex with a child. For the same amount of money, a four-man operative team can be placed on the field to stop him. Myself and several other Austin Peace students took this upon our hearts to bring this organization to Clarksville. We're one of 39 cities that are walking on September 27th to raise awareness and funding for these operative teams. Cities include San Francisco, Seattle, and even Washington, D.C., where the President of the United States himself is aware of this and will be walking. My call to action is that you take part by registering at sctnow.org for that walk, participating with you and your areas of influence, perhaps even as teams, just like you do in Riverfest. And also, when you register, it calls you to an action of fundraising. And I just pray and I ask that you take this upon your hearts, because this is an issue that is not just overseas. This is so close to home that if you go to slaverymap.org, you will see cases in Nashville and Murfreesboro and Brentwood, subdivision homes that have been busted and raided for human trafficking. This is not just over there anymore. It's here. We're working with Greg Work, the head of the operatives team, as well as Dr. Laura Lederer out of the State Department to raise legislation, because 10 years ago, we did not even have the correct legislation to handle this kind of issue once we found it was in our shores. I thank you for your time. Are there any questions? Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Kevin Johnson.
The Honorable Mayor, council members, be glad to be in this room again. It's been a while since I've been here. This time I would like to talk briefly about Title VI and a request or two to the mayor and this council. I would first like to read a portion from Tennessee Code annotated dealing with Title VI, and it reads as follows. Each state governmental entity subject to the requirements of the Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and regulations promulgated pursuant thereto shall develop a Title VI implementation plan and with participation by protected beneficiaries as may be required by such law or regulations. To the extent applicable, such plans shall include Title VI implementation plans of any subrecipient of federal funds throughout the state entity. I've enclosed in this packet part of an ordinance from Nashville and also from Memphis, and they have pushed forward legislation that incorporated Title VI in their particular information and provided to the public to follow. The city of Clarksville have generated interest as far as Title VI compliance and so forth, and being here for 10 years, I have not seen where this particular information was brought formally introduced and made as a matter of public record. Since the city is growing in leaps and bounds, if I'm mistaken, it's still in the top 10 of the nation of growth. I think we're still in that territory. I certainly would like to see, if at all possible, that the city would incorporate this into their plan so that the protected beneficiaries would be included in the process of making decisions on how this plan can be implemented. So my ultimate request is that the city would invite the Department of Justice to come down, the Coordination and Review Section to come down and look at if we're actually in compliance, and if we are in compliance, to what extent, and have this information revealed to the community so that we know where we stand. If there's some things that must be addressed, I think we can get this clarification and then move forward so that we can all enjoy the benefits of this growing community in the area of jobs, labor, participation process of making decisions on how stimulus money can be utilized and so forth and so on. So I've just introduced to this council membership to take a look at that and take it under consideration, and then if at all possible, get back with us to see where we can go with this. If you'd be so kind to do that, I would greatly appreciate it. Certainly thank you for this time, and if you have any questions or comments, I certainly would like to entertain them at this time.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
Okay, Ms. Melanie Paradis. I hope I did your name justice. How do you pronounce it?
Parody?
Parody?
That's correct.
Is that a French name?
What was that?
Is that a French name?
Yes, it is. His last name's French.
Yes.
My husband's French-Canadian.
Good. Thank you.
I'm here to address yard sales. I was at one the weekend before, or 2 weekends before, and I didn't know that you had to have permits to have a yard sale, and neither did the person that I was at the yard sale. A building and codes person came to let him know that they're not allowed, and I did some research that you have to have them, you have to come and sign in, and they're free. I would like them not to have permits. I spoke with one person, I'm not sure if it was a council member anymore, but they said it was a problem 10 years ago. People were putting up signs everywhere. Well, I've moved so much. I'm a military wife. And every time we move, there's yard sales all over. And I know there's a lot of military in the community. You move in and out. And I wouldn't even thought to look up local ordinances for having a yard sale. Also, the man, I guess, that was in violation, he had to come to court. And even though building and codes person said you're usually let go, so I was thinking that it was a waste of time. The building and codes person said he'd spent the last half hour taking down the man's signs, which I didn't think that the person was necessarily a bad person to have a yard sale, and he didn't know. I also had a hard time finding the ordinance, because when you look on the left side of all the pages where all they are, it says junk sales, and I wouldn't automatically think, okay, it's a junk sale. I was looking specifically for yard sale. It's kind of hidden. You actually have to scroll over pawn shops, junk sales, and then when you scroll up, it kind of pops up. So I'm asking that permits maybe not be allowed for yard sales. I don't see anywhere I've lived where that caused, it looked trashy. They usually fall down, people usually take them down. But if that is a problem around certain areas, like down by the riverfront, that maybe people not be allowed to post signs in those areas, certain areas where they want to be beautiful and out in the local community, the streets, that it be allowed. And I noticed that it said there's only a minimum of 2 yard sales a year. I've never had a yard sale myself, but I know some of my friends, if they have a yard sale one weekend, they like to have it the next weekend also to get rid of whatever they have left, and then maybe later on in the year that they have more. So I asked that yard sale permits not be allowed. I would think that it's kind of like a waste of a judge's time to have to just tell someone that you're let go and the person has to pay a court fee. Also, I know to post it on online, I guess a newspaper, someone said it was like $20 or $30, which at yard sales you might only make that much. I love going out to yard sales. It gets me to know the new people in my community and gets me comfortable with the streets. I don't know, I just like doing it, and that's how I still find my yard sales, with signs. I find my way out of them as well. So a lot of people that I've talked to in the last weekend or so don't know about it as well. I wouldn't think to have to look on that on local ordinances. And I really felt bad for the person, like he felt like he was some bad drug dealer or something. He seemed like a really nice guy, just got back from Iraq, and now he's got to go to a court date about a yard sale. What else I was thinking, as far as if they not be posted in certain places, that that if it's about money, maybe apply it to something else if there's a way to have to raise money for that, because I don't know how much is made off of people. I know it's permits free, but people violating, I don't know if that's like a money-making factor. I'm sure that I would rather give donations or a little bit more to my taxes so that someone could have a yard sale. Also, someone said that someone on the weekend, the people that take down all the yard sales and actually write up the tickets, they're not there on the weekends anyway. They're only there Monday through Friday, so it's hard for them to catch all these people anyway. So I just thought it was a waste of people's times. Thank you very much for listening to me and made me think about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we still have 2 or 3 minutes, so we'll take a few minutes and be ready at about 7:30. Thank you. Please register your attendance, council. Do you know which one is here? Is this? Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight, we are recognizing a person that has served this community well. He has been a person that I didn't all the time agree with his writing, but he's a person that was respected greatly. I'd like to ask Mr. Eric Snyder if he'd come up and come on. It's an honor, has been an honor to serve with Eric. I think the entire council can speak to that and say the same thing. You know, Eric has a tough job, just as we have a tough job. His job has been to make sure that he wrote stories that were fair to both sides. And sometimes stories in the League Chronicle, I wasn't sure I was fair to my side, and I told him so, and he told me he didn't agree with that. And then we were friends. And that's really important, to agree to disagree. But for the most part, Eric Snyder has done a great job representing the League Chronicle, and you certainly have done a great job representing this city and making sure that the news is put out in a fair, honest, and honorable way. And we, as a city council, and myself personally, want to thank you for your service to this community. We want to thank you for your fairness in the way that you've conducted your business with us. And on behalf of the city council, I'd like to offer you a mayor's certificate presented to Mr. Eric Snyder in recognition of your honesty and dedication to willfully reporting fair but fact-filled stories in the city of Clarksville. Your service to the citizens of this city, covering challenging but fair stories, has been greatly appreciated. We thank you for your professionalism, for your journalistic integrity, and continued sense of humor. Presented this the 3rd day of September, 2009. Thank you for your honor. One more sword tomorrow would be a good one to be very helpful.
I'm going to shake your hand, but you sat down.
Let's punish him.
Punish him good.
I would have had time to have the rest.
Is today Eric Snyder Day?
Well, somewhere. His girlfriend thinks it is.
He should be given a certificate to his replacement.
Yeah. We have a party for him. Or her. Okay, public hearing. Mr. Grubbs.
Thank you, Mayor. Madam Clerk, will you please read ordinance 21?
Ordinance 21, 2009, 2010, first reading, amending the zoning ordinance and the official code of the city of Clarksville relative to Madison Street Corridor Urban Design Overlay.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mayor, I move we go into public hearing.
Second.
Motion second to go into public hearing. Those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed. In public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of ordinance 21? Please come forward. Anyone to speak in opposition to ordinance 21? Please come forward. Okay.
Mayor, I move we go back into regular session.
Motion second to go back in regular session. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed. Back in regular session.
And as a quick reminder to all members of the council, all motions will be upon advice of legal counsel, shall be for approval. Okay, ordinance 21, 2009-10, both the staff and the planning commission recommendation is for approval, and I so move.
Motion second. Any discussion on ordinance 21? Mark, you want to discuss it? Okay. I don't know how it came on. I'm sorry. Okay, seeing none, please press your selection. Okay. Ordinance 21 is approved.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Grubbs. Before we go into consent agenda, there is also a group here tonight that I met one of the gentlemen out in the passageway that's here. I think they're a group of college students working in the communication field and observing tonight the City Council. We'd like to ask you, if you'd like to please stand so we can recognize you and thank you for being here tonight. Those are here for communications. Very good. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, consent agenda, Madam Clerk.
All items in this portion of the agenda are considered to be routine and non-controversial by the council and may be approved by one motion. However, a member of the council may request that an item be removed for separate consideration under the appropriate committee report. Ordinance 18, 2009-2010, second reading, amending the official code relative to closing dates for weekend holidays. Ordinance 22, 2009-2010, second reading, authorizing exercise of right of eminent domain to obtain easements and rights-of-way at the intersection of State Route 112 and Memorial Drive. Ordinance 23, 2009-2010, second reading, authorizing exercise of right of eminent domain to obtain easements and rights-of-way at the intersection of State Route 48 and Tylertown Road. Ordinance 24, 2009, 2010, second reading, authorizing exercise of right of eminent domain to obtain easements and rights-of-way at Rossview Road and Old Dunbar Cave Road. Ordinance 25, 2009, 2010, second reading, authorizing exercise of right of eminent domain to obtain easements and rights-of-way for improvements to Sango Road near its intersection with State Route 76. Ordinance 26, 2009, 2010, second reading, amending the official code relative to due dates for bills and penalties. Approval of board appointments, Economic Development Council, David Allen, September 2009 through June 2011. Tree Board, James Lewis, ex officio, coterminous. Adoption of minutes, July 9th and August 6th.
Any motion? Motion second. Any discussion about consent agenda? Those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Consent agenda approved. Okay. Building and Codes, Mr. Red.
Thank you, Mayor. Our Codes Enforcement Division worked 566 cases for the month of August, and this does include the care of premises, weeds, and property maintenance, and removal of 502 illegal signs. That's my report, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Community Development, Mr. Summers.
Nothing official, so just let you know, he's in the gang, been going through a number of audits, dealing with housing development and coming through with blind spots.
Very good, completed. I've got some reports from HUD that the audit was very clean, so very nice. Thank you, Mr. Summers. Yes, sir. Finance Committee, Ms. McLaughlin. You sure may, excuse me.
Thank you. Ordinance 29, amending the 2010 Clarksville Fire and Rescue operating budget for insurance proceeds for damaged equipment. Make a motion for approval.
And second, any discussion? Seeing none, press your selection on ordinance 29, please. Ordinance 29 is approved. Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin. Gas and Water, Mr. Summers.
Nothing official, but you pass on some news. The gas and water crews are working very hard with some new technology, dealing with taking care of the smells and effects down at the sewer treatment plant. Looking pretty positive, and I want to commend them for their hard work on that.
Thank you, sir. General Services, Mr. Harris.
No report, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Parks and Recreation, Mr. Forrester.
Resolution 15, 2009, 2010, ratifying the mayor's appointment of Mark Cummins as Director of Parks and Recreation. I recommend approval.
Second, any discussion on Resolution 15? Seeing none, please press your selection. Wallace, thank you. Resolution 15 is approved. Is that it, Mr. Forrester?
Yes.
Thank you. Public Safety, Mr. Grubbs.
Thank you, Mayor. I have several things to bring before the council tonight. City of Clarksville Fire Rescue Department will be hosting the annual 9/11 memorial ceremony on Friday, September the 11th at 6 p.m. at the main fire station on Main Street. There will also be an open house starting at 4 o'clock and lasting up until the time of the ceremony, so we invite all the public and the members of the council to attend that. Also, for the month of July, Fire Rescue answered 486 emergency calls, and the CPD for complaints and calls for service for that month was 6,580. And I'm going to yield to Mr. Lewis. He's got an announcement to make also.
Get your button there, James. That's right, it's on. Oh, yes, sir.
Last Saturday, the District 7 shoot house put on a pistol shoot. A pretty good turnout, there. Also on October the 17th, they're going to be hosting a bass tournament here in Clarksville. If you'd like information, you can contact any of the council members to get the flyers. All the money is going to go to help build the new shoot house for the police department. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Anything else, Mr. Grubbs?
Well, I was going to say something about our chief, but I'll look at him smiling back there. That concludes our report.
Was it second place, Chief?
Little inside joke, Mayor, but yes, that concludes our report.
Thank you, sir. Street Committee, Mr. Lewis.
Mayor, as normal, the street department does an outstanding job. They're working hard on relative trails, keeping our roads safe for us to drive on, and also worked additional 300 work orders last month. And that concludes my report, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Ms. Johnson?
Yes, Mayor. The Clarksville Transit System's ridership for August 2009 was 64,101 passengers. The weekday average was 2,517. The city garage work orders were 435, and the work order hours was 905.20.
Goodness.
That concludes my report.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. The Transportation Department is to be commended for the way they've improvised their service to be able to bypass the downtown
Yes.
area with all the construction going on.
They sure have.
And they certainly have done a great job. Thank you, Jim Smith, and your entire staff. Thank you. And I'd like to tag along also with what James Lewis said in reference to the Street Department, also Parks and Recreation, for the great job you're doing, accepting an additional responsibility of the Rails to Trails. I recognize, David and Missy, the additional workload that is added on your departments, particularly in a very critical time that you have, which is the summertime. And both of your departments have handled them greatly and proficiently. We're going to be announcing a little bit later in the program a grand opening of the Rails to Trails, but I know that it has put great imposition on your department and your staffs. And I just want the public to know, I know the city council appreciates it, but I want the public to know how great a job that your departments have done. And this Rails to Trails, naming a new name coming up a little later, is just going to be a wonderful addition to our community, and it's directly attributed to your commitment, each of your department's commitment, and the hard work of your departments to be able to make this come to completion. So thanks to both of you. Okay. New business. Ordinance 97, I think we're going to postpone that for 60 days. Is that right, Missy? Okay, unless there's an objection, we'll postpone that for 60 days. Ordinance 27 on second reading. I'm going to make a motion to get that on the floor for second reading. So I make a motion to approve ordinance 27.
Second.
And second. Now, Lance, if you'll come forward, and while he's coming forward, I wanted to take just a few moments and tell the city council that I thank you for your patience in this matter. We all know from the articles that Mr. Snyder has written about in reference to the Clarksville Department of Electricity, the Power Board, and the issues that we have out there. And I've been at several of the meetings, and we have some representatives here tonight. We have the vice presidents that are here tonight. We have Christy Batts. We have, everybody stand so I'll know who you are. Everybody, Kim, Earl, thank each of you for being here. These are the vice presidents that are running your department out there and doing a great job, and we appreciate you being here tonight. In addition to that, we have the Power Boards, many members of the Power Board present. I'd like to ask them if they would stand. Thank you for your volunteer service to this community, and we appreciate you being here tonight. And that's a tough job. The being on the Power Board and also running that department has been a tough job. There have certainly been some issues out there over the past several months that's been public, because we're a public entity. They become public, and what we found in the past few months, that there need to be some tweaking of our relationship with Power Board. Tonight, I think that you have before you an ordinance that Mr. Baker is going to present to you. Before he does, also, I want to say this was one of those situations on the development of the final second reading on the ordinance that was very time consuming. As late as Tuesday afternoon, as late as 5 to 5:15 in the afternoon, Mr. Baker, Lynn Stokes, Debbie Frazier, Ben Griffin, a group of people were still working on this to try to get it fine-tuned so we'd be able to have it here before you. Unfortunately, I was had to go on a called meeting away that was an emergency, not an emergency call, but a call that came up at the last moment about a new industry coming to our community, and it came in Tuesday night. I was gone most of the day Wednesday out on this call, and because of that, it put us off another day on being able to get this to you. because I needed to review it prior to it being presented to you. So that's why you got it today. We were trying to get it to you on Wednesday. I'm hoping in the near future we're going to be able to have an announcement that'll give you good reason to allow me to take off to be gone that day. But so in trying to get the information to you and trying to understand what your requests are and getting it inputted into your ordinance, we believe that that we have reached a good ordinance to present to you tonight. So, Mr. Baker, I'll let you do it.
Councilmembers, if you would first, I want you to pull out what is the clean copy of the proposed amendments, all right? And look at the first paragraph there where the whereases. I want to say that we'll need to add something there that was just left out by inadvertence and mistake on my part. Where it says, after it says the city of Clarksville, that will add in that in accordance with Tennessee Code Annotated, Section 7-52-101 et sequential, which just means and the following. And that is the municipal electric plant law, and that was just left out by mistake. And then if you'll look at section 13-113, H, petty cash fund, where it says shall disperse cash in behalf of the department, that should say on behalf of the department. And then finally, the last little thing that I just didn't catch until just literally a little while ago, section 13-115 at the bottom, there's 2-115s. That very last one obviously needs to be 116. So with that said, that's what you'll be, what we propose that you vote on tonight. So now if you would, turn to your markup copy that has the blue and red on it, and you can also keep out your other one if you want. I don't want to belabor this, and so I'll plan on going through most of it fairly quickly. The areas where I think you're probably most interested in, I'll slow it down a little. But I'll tell you, as I stated in the email when you got this, you know, the things in black are things that have not changed from the original provisions that we have in the code right now dealing with electric power board. The things that are in red show the things that were changed from the original code language we have now. If it's a red line through, it shows what I deleted, and if it's red just by itself, then it shows what I added, and that was reflected in the first reading version that you passed last month. And then the things in blue are things that have changed from what's in the code now, or things that have changed from what was presented to you on first reading, and that was in red. And so the things that are lined through blue shows you things that have been deleted from either the code as it exists or from first reading. And then the things that are in just regular blue with no line through are things that have been added and are brand new. And what I was going to tell you too is that the way I went about this is, first of all, I wanted to create a template that I hope that we can use basically for each department. And that template will start out in a very general terms and go down through specific terms. And so you'll start out, and hopefully as we work through the Charter and Code Revisions Committee, we'll do this for each department. And there's going to be obviously differences because each department has its own differences. And this particular department has quite a few differences because it's governed by that municipal electric plant law. But you'll start out with the first paragraph that talks about here is the department it's created or it exists. And then you'll go, here's the department head and here's what his duties are. But in this particular case, we go out, here's the department, and then here's the electric power board and what their powers and duties are, and then here's the superintendent. And then all of the mechanics of how that department is going to run things, all the specific little details get put into the bottom. So let's start with 13-101. You'll see there is going to be a Department of Electricity. Obviously, there already is, but this just codifies it and makes it law as a part of the department, or Clarksville. And you'll see that they shall operate and maintain an electrical system for the purpose of furnishing electricity to customers and such other systems for the purpose of furnishing other services or commodities as permitted by law. All right? That's not saying that they can do whatever they want. It's just saying if if something else that they can get into later, who knows what the future holds, or maybe some type of new energy, may be called a commodity instead of a service, this is not going to have to change. Go to 102. Here you go with your election of the power board. It's the creation of the power board, and that language there which follows where it says, shall have general supervision and control. All of that language is lifted verbatim from the state statute. And what I want to tell you here is that almost all of the stuff in blue you're going to see tonight, especially in the first 5 or 6 sections, is language verbatim out of the state statute. And that is why I put it in there. And the reason why it's worded the way it is because that's what the state statute requires. All right, and so then you go to 103, and we start getting into the specifics about the power board. And right now the board has 7 members, and we'll leave it at 7 members. The eligibility for appointment, you'll see those changes that were made that are reflected in red. That was stuff that was already you voted on in first reading. That was straight out of the statute. Those are the requirements for eligibility. And you'll see I've added a sentence there. No regular compensated officer or employee of the city shall be eligible for appointment to the board until at least 1 year after expiration of term of their office or employment with the city. That's a sentence that's in the state statute that I did not catch upon first reading. It was my fault. All right, so I apologize to you. That sentence is verbatim from the state statute. Go on down to C, appointment of board members. You will see there that they are going to be appointed by the mayor, but it's subject to your vote of approval. And you'll see that since we're kind of starting afresh now, we need a starting point, and it's contained in there. 2 of the existing terms, or 2 existing board members, their terms expire in March of 2010, 2 in March of 2011, and then 3 in March of 2012. And so as those terms expire and they come up for renewal, then in March of each year, which is that's the same what the code talks about now, the mayor will decide who he wants to appoint, and will come to you, and you will have the authority to approve them or disapprove them. If you disapprove them, he'll have to come up with someone else. All right, and then they will serve for 3 years. Now, I'll tell you, the state statute says the terms are 4 years. All right, but that statute was passed, as I've told y'all, in 1935, and our private act charter was passed after that. And our private act charter says that supervisory utility boards will be composed of 3 to 7 members who shall serve no more than 3 years in any given term. So you can't change that private act charter because it was enacted later, trumps the state law, so you can't change the term to 4 years in accordance with the state statute. And you'll see that there in D, so it's 3 years. And then the E, that deals with a vacancy. If a member of the power board, if he resigns, if they're removed by you through the removal power, or if just for some reason they cease to be a member, then you fill that term. Again, the mayor appoints them, and you will vote on it, all right? But they will only fill that unexpired term, and then there'll have to be a new appointment. Let's go to 104. All of that stuff, you'll see a bunch of things that we're lying through. All of those things, none of that you see is contained in the state statute. That's just stuff that, I guess over the years, or actually it's stuff that was in the original ordinance that created the power board back in 1939. But none of it's in the state statute, and it's mostly things that pertain to internal business of the power board. And so I've taken it all out and put in instead, there are some matters that I would call internal affairs of the power board. There are some specific provisions in the state statute. For example, it talks about it has to be they can't act unless it's by a quorum of majority present. It talks about they have to elect a chair. They can designate a secretary and a treasurer, or one person to serve as secretary treasurer, and they shall fix their compensation. Unless it's they can elect one of their own fellow board members, but if they do, they don't get any compensation. And they can fix the amount of any surety bond for the secretary and treasurer. And then public meetings, they have to hold public meetings at least once per month at regular times and places. And if they change the meetings, it has to be done in accordance with the Sunshine Law. And the notices for the regular meetings have to be done, obviously, in accordance with the Sunshine Law. They set their own rules of procedure, and then this is a change here, compensation. The state statute says that they shall serve without compensation, but they shall be allowed necessary traveling and other expenses while engaged in business of the board, including allowance not to exceed $200 per month for attendance at meetings. And so that's, again, all of that whole entire paragraph is verbatim from the state statute. Section 13105, electric power board removal. There is a provision in the state statute that talks about removal, but it's just one little paragraph, and it doesn't discuss the mechanics of how that is accomplished. It just simply says, as you'll see in that first paragraph, any member of electric power board may be removed for cause, and basically it's got to be upon a 3/4 vote of the city council and only after preferment of formal charges by resolution of the city council at a public hearing. That's what the state statute says. And when you compare what we had originally, you'll see, I think, that it's quite a bit of change, actually. Because originally you'll see the mark through, originally it says on charges filed by majority vote of the power board. All right, that's no longer the case. That's just not authorized by the statute, or any member thereof. Even one person on the power board could do it, or by majority vote of the council, or any 2 members of the council. And again, that's not what the statute says, the way you go about it. And it says it can be for permanent disability. We've left that in, malfeasance, misfeasance, or nonfeasance, or for conduct that materially impairs his usefulness as a board member, or that seriously impairs the respect and regard theretofore accorded him by citizens of the city. What I would suggest to you is that those last 2 provisions are probably way too vague to be enforceable. All right, it's way too subjective, and it's never going to fly if you end up removing somebody and they file a lawsuit. So typically what you see instead is this language to include permanent disability or malfeasance, misfeasance, or nonfeasance in office. And that's basically if they do something they shouldn't have done, or they fail to do something that they should have done. And that could mean any number of things, but it's terms of art that is pretty well defined in the case law. And then it has to be it must be by a 3/4 vote of the city council, and you have to do it by a resolution. All right, and then we've left in the rest of it pretty much that was in the old code, because that gives you the mechanics of how the procedure is going to go. All right, it's not in the state statute, but it doesn't say you can't have it. So charges will be in writing. You can, the council can have an investigation if you want. Prior to any hearing, you've got to give due process to someone, and that requires notice and an opportunity to be heard. So that's in there. And then they'll have a right to have a public hearing. They can appear and defend in person, or they can have counsel. They can use the city council's power of compulsory process for attendance of witnesses. And then the vote of the city council, this is required. It shall be by roll call, essentially. And then the last part, if you vote to remove them, they're gone. That's it. All right, and then we took out the last sentence there that talks about an appeal. And the reason why is because you don't have the power to confer any jurisdiction or authority on any circuit court, chancery court, or general sessions court. And you don't have the power to say what the appeal process is going to be. But there is, in fact, an appeal procedure. If they're removed and they think that you made a bad decision as a body, they can file a petition for a writ of certiorari review to have the courts, the state courts, review that in accordance with the law. 13106 A and B deals with just records and reports, and you'll see that that language in both those paragraphs are pretty much just verbatim from the state statute. 107, this deals with, we start getting into the real meat of it now. Subject to contracts of the city, there's no real change on that paragraph, subsection A. And then the reason why I've taken out the old paragraph 2, system of operation, is because there's just nothing in the state statute that authorizes that language. And it's pretty broad language, and it's just not needed, and it's not authorized in any event. So that comes out. And then appointment of the superintendent, and again, this is verbatim from the state statute. The power board shall appoint the superintendent. He has to be qualified, by training and experience. He doesn't have to be a resident at the time of appointment. His salary shall be fixed by the board, and he shall serve at the pleasure of the board. He's an at-will person who can be removed by the board anytime they want to. Then general powers of the board and the superintendent, again, that language is, and including the changes in red, which was, you saw on first reading, that is verbatim from the state statute. And then we have this new section that is called the enumerated powers of the board, and all of those enumerated powers there are straight out of the statute verbatim. I cannot tell you why that this was not included when the ordinance was passed in 1939, and it's that particular ordinance had only been amended twice since that time, and it was just really, one was just kind of a grammatical thing, and the other one, they amended the superintendent's duties and powers to make it verbatim comply with what the state statute said, but for some reason, they didn't do the same thing regarding the power board. So you'll see there, they determine programs and make plans for the acquisition. They make determinations of improvements rates, and that there's those words we talked about last time, financial practices. They establish rules and regulations as they deem necessary. They disperse all monies established in the electric plant fund for the acquisition, improvement, and maintenance of the electric plant. Again, all that verbatim. 108, superintendent enumerated powers. And here's where we start to really get into what the purpose is of, as I understand it, what the mayor was concerned about and what I believe you're concerned about. And that was to assert more control over the superintendent and the department as a whole by the power board, and to increase the reporting back from the superintendent and the power board to the council and increase your oversight. All right, so here you'll see these superintendent enumerated powers. This is straight out of the state statute. It's verbatim. There's certain things that you just cannot take away from him, and we'll get into. You'll see he has actual charge of the actual construction and management and operation of electric plant, which is what you expect of a general manager of a department. Go to B, and you'll see there, I tweaked that language a little bit to put the general first and then the specific second. That's a change from the first reading. You'll see, subject to provisions of general law, city charter, and ordinances, and any rules or regulations adopted by the Electric Power Board, to include any pay scales, salary ranges, or other provisions governing compensation, benefits, retirement, or discipline. The superintendent shall appoint all employees and fix their duties and compensation. That language about he shall appoint employees and fix their duties and compensation, you can't get around that. That's what the state statute says. So, but what you can do, I believe, legally, and I base this on some case law and things that MTAS opinions, is you can allow the power board to put some parameters on his discretion. And that's what you do. You say, all right, we're going to enact some pay scales or salary ranges, and we're going to put some parameters on you. So you get to tell that employee, you get to hire the employee. We can't tell you exactly who to hire, but we can fire you if you hire people we don't want you to hire. You always got that authority. So the power board has some leverage there, but he gets to tell what the exact compensation number is going to be. But he has to do it within the range established by the board. All right. So, and it goes on, technical consultants and advisors, attorneys, all that straight out of the statute. And then we've added this sentence. And again, this is to assert that control that we're looking for, the supervisory control and the oversight. The number of employee or officer positions within the Department of Electricity shall not be increased without prior approval of the board. So he's got that bottom line, budget number, and he's got a certain number of employees, or she has a certain number of employees out there, and they can't just go willy-nilly start hiring, whoever they want, and without getting the board approval for that if it's going to increase the number. All right. The payment of bonuses shall not be authorized. Paragraph C, no change from what is in the current code, and that is verbatim from the state statute. D, no change from what's in the current code, and that is also in the state statute verbatim. I did have to add that one little part there you'll see in red about letting contracts where basically it talks about any work or construction exceeding the cost amount specified, be advertised by the superintendent for bids in the manner provided by general law, the city charter, and ordinances. All right, we put that in there. That was actually in first reading. And so, again, that's starting to rein in CDE and the superintendent out there, or that position, so that they know they truly are a part of the city. They're the city department, and they've got to follow the city code and charter to the maximum extent permitted, unless there's something in state law that says otherwise. And then E, there's no change. 109, section 13-110, section 13-111, no real significant changes there. Except the, all right, and then we've taken out 107, you saw that in the first, and all that said, by the way, is that the board can ask TVA to come and sit in on their meetings and give them advice. Well, they don't need a code section to say that. TVA can come if they want to, they don't have to, but the board can always ask them to come down and give them advice and come sit in on their meetings anytime they want to. All right, and then 13-112, rates for electric service, no change. Now let's get into 113, and now here's where the stuff that I think everybody's most interested in. All right, you'll see that first paragraph, and this is financial affairs, that first paragraph was what you had in first reading last time. I've taken that out, and instead it's been reworded so that, and this deals with the budget and with reporting and with debt, and it's been reworded so that it's consistent and almost fairly verbatim with what's already in our code right now for all the other departments. All right, when I got to looking at it closer, I felt like we want to try to make it as consistent as possible. All right, so, but on the other hand, you still got that state statute, the municipal electric plant law, that you have to satisfy. All right, so what we say here, the superintendent shall prepare an annual budget as directed by the Electric Power Board. Now, you're going to see over here in a minute that we took out that old language from first reading about the line item, so-called line item veto. All right, and it's still there. It's just not called line item veto, and it's not in that other place. It's here. It's right there. The superintendent shall prepare an annual budget as directed by the Power Board. So he presents them. He prepares a budget. They don't like it. They send it back, or they tell him change the line item. All right, the Power Board has got the line item power. It's just not called that. All right, so he prepares an annual budget as directed by the Power Board, and then he must provide a copy of it to the city director of finance and the city council, and then he shall implement the budget as approved by the board and the city council. That's what you asked for. That's what you've been given. The total appropriation approved by the board and the city council shall not be exceeded without prior approval of the board. All right. The reason why we've done it that way is to give the board some flexibility. All right. You can change that and say you want to make that basically say shall not be exceeded without prior approval of the board and the city council. But they have to have some flexibility out there. You've got this separate board that you don't have with any other department, the gas and water department. And I don't think the city council wants to be meeting 3, 4, 5 times a month, if that's what it comes to approve every little budget amendment. What you do have that power, though, is you've got that bottom line power to say, okay, that's the bottom line budget. And you may say, well, what kind of power is that when they could just come back and amend it? Well, and I guess the response to that is, well, why do you have a power board then? I mean, because they have to have some authority and a power too if you're going to have them. All right. So it shall not be exceeded without prior approval of the board. And go to paragraph 2. In the implementation of the budget, the Department of Electricity shall generally follow the line item estimates of expenditures submitted as part of the budget document. Straight out of what our city code says already for other departments. No line item transfer of funds to or from employee salaries or benefits or for capital projects shall occur without prior approval of the Electric Power Board. Straight out of what our current ordinance or code says for other departments, except instead of Electric Power Board, it says City Council. Okay? So it's the same situation there. If you want all the ultimate power, okay, you can have it say without prior approval, Electric Power Board and the City Council. But that, it kind of begs the question, why are you having a power board? Okay? So That's why it says what it says there. And I'll tell you, we have hashed this out. Ben and Lynn and Debbie, and I've talked to David Silvis, and we've tried to come up with. I hate to call it a compromise, but maybe it is kind of a compromise to balance these competing powers and interests and authorities. Of the power board. You don't want them to just be an inert body that can't do anything. With what I think is rightfully your concern to have oversight and supervisory responsibility here, if you're going to have a power board, which of course you can always abolish them. And then subsection 3, subject to any contracts or bonds for indebtedness heretofore incurred, the Department of Electricity shall not incur any debt, issue any bonds, or secure any loan without prior approval of the Electric Power Board and the City Council. So that gives you that hammer there. They can't just willy-nilly go out and start, borrowing money, all right, because that can come back on the city and can, impact our credit rating and can have serious consequences and issues. So there, it is the City Council as the final arbiter. All right, let's go to B, monthly reports. No real serious changes there. From what's already in the code and the few changes I made that was presented to you on first reading. Basically, they got to make monthly reports to the Director of Finance, including their trial balance and a summary of financial operations every month, and any other reports that the mayor wants, the City Council, or the Director of Finance requests. And then annual report to the City Council and Director of Finance at least once each year. Originally, it said the Power Board. We're changing that to pull back some of that power and give it to the City Audit Committee, who has it with regard to all the other departments. All right, so it's the City Audit Committee shall cause a certified public accountant to make a thorough audit of the financial affairs and records of the Department of Electricity. And when the audit has been completed, the Audit Committee shall furnish a copy of the same to the Board, Electric Power Board, to the Director of Finance, who shall in turn report it to you. And then D, we had that in the first reading. That's just to make it clear, there has been questions in the past about this, that the city internal audit has got oversight responsibility of CDE, just like they do every other city department. Surety bonds for the board, no real change. Instead of the city paying it, it's going to come out of the funds for Department of Electricity. Insurance, the board they decide, what amounts or who to go with as far as insuring the property of the Department of Electricity, but they got to confer with the city risk manager so that everything's coordinated. Record of indebtedness contracted, that's pretty much the same from what's already in the code. I've added that except as permitted by general law and provided for herein, and that gets back to that $50,000 provision about getting supplies that you saw back up there in the superintendent's powers, because that's what the state statute says, and you just don't have any authority to change that. Then petty cash fund, no real change. Depositing collections, no change. You'll see the old paragraph 10 that was on first reading, they had that line item veto stuff. All that stuff in that paragraph is subsumed in those other paragraphs. And then we've added this one, J, purchasing and procurement, to make it absolutely clear that the Department of Electricity shall adhere to the provisions of general law, state law, and the charter and ordinance of the city with regard to purchasing and procurement, except that when required, reports regarding purchasing and procurement shall be made to the Electric Power Board instead of Finance Administration. All right, and that's, so what we're saying there is, we've got these provisions in our code that says you got to have, bids, you got to have public advertising, you got to have all this, and it's broken down by depending if it's over 10,000 or if it's 5,000 or 9,099, and so forth. All right, all of that's going to apply now, or I would argue, submit to you, it should have been applying all along. But if there's any question, there's no question now. If you pass this, it's going to apply to the Department of Electricity, and they're going to know it. All right. But the only difference is, because you've got this unique body, this power board, instead of reporting, there are some provisions in the purchasing law that talks about reporting to the Finance Administration Committee. Instead of doing that, they'll report it to the Electric Power Board. All right. 14, disbursements, no change. 115, our city code of ethics already states that it applies to all employees, officers, officials, boards, commissions, you name it, everybody. The terms of the city ethics code says, in my I don't think there's any doubt, it applies to CDE, to all the employees, it applies to Power Board, but just to make sure that everyone understands it does apply, I've added this part, and along with, obviously, any conflict of interest laws, and we have a conflict of interest provision in our charter, and there's also a state law that deals with that. And then what's now this 116 talks about telephone, telegraph, telecommunication, cable television, internet-related services. All right, what that does not say that they can do all those things. What it says is they can do all those things if it's permitted and authorized by law. And there's specific state law provisions that deal with this. And obviously, you know, we already had the referendum that previously passed that allowed them to go down this path of offering internet and cable TV. All right, and that was done in compliance with state law. But there may be other things that they may want to do in the future. All right, and this just says they can do it so long as they meet all the hoops or jump through the hoops that is required by state law. But then, and here's why I felt like we should add this. And again, all this language is verbatim from the state statute. All right, but it says if they're going to go into these areas in such event, if it's authorized by law, the department shall establish a separate division to deliver such services. That's what the state law says now. The separate division shall maintain separate accounting and record-keeping systems from the electric power division. We don't want commingling of assets. And the department may not subsidize the operation of the separate division with revenues from the electric power operation, all right? Because we don't want the electric power side to get...
Mark?
Yes, Mayor. I would like to make a motion to postpone 30 days, please.
Motion to postpone, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to postpone ordinance 27 for 30 days. Motion and second. Yes to postpone? Sure, you want to address that?
Yes. Mayor, actually, the reason for that postponement, I must remind the council, this is the second reading. With so many changes that Mr. Baker brought forward, this is not the same document that we approved on the first reading, so I think it would be a good idea for us to actually go through it again and actually debate it, because there are a lot of issues that need to be debated, and I think tonight won't be the night to do so, especially on the second reading.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Red. On the postponement only.
Yes, sir, Mayor. This was the first time, I guess, of course, I wasn't at the executive committee meeting. I apologize for that. And I really appreciate the work that, and the long hours that Lance has put in here, and I really appreciate you, Mayor, for dispatching Lance to come up with a document like this that'll give us more control over the power board. This part that Lance has talked about, that if we were to abolish the power board, that somehow the agreement with the money there that is owed, that we could become liable for that? Are you saying then, that's the first time I'd heard of that, and I'd just like to say I would be for postponing too for 30 days until we can look at that further.
This is in Appendix A from one of the bond, it defines board from one of the bond issues, and these documents, by the way, they're like 100 pages. So board means the Clarksville Electric Power Board, control the system. The complete and independent control and operation of the system shall be vested in the board, subject, however, to the obligation and duty on the part of the board to carry out and perform faithfully all the covenants and agreements contained in this resolution as hereafter supplemented or amended.
Any other discussion, Mr. Red?
No.
Talking about the postponement only. Okay, Mr. Harris?
Again, and the only reason for this, I must remind the council, Mr. Baker, we spoke to you on Thursday and we discussed some changes, and the changes were denied. Comment was made that if there were any changes to be made, it need to be brought forward during this voting session as an amendment. But as I look at this document has totally been changed from the original passing from the first reading, and that's my reason for this postponement.
Any other discussion about the postponement? Okay, you're making a motion to postpone your ordinance 27, that's just been presented to you for 30 days. Please press. I don't know, he just said postpone for 30 days.
Yes, next regular session.
Okay, so there's a motion postponed to the next regular session on ordinance 27 that was presented. Yes to postpone, no not to. It ties. I vote to not postpone. Okay, so it fails. Motion fails. Okay. Any other comments? Ms. McLaughlin?
I'd like to make an amendment, or propose an amendment to section 13-113, subsection 1. At the very end, the last sentence says the total appropriation approved by the board and the city council should not be exceeded without prior approval of the board. I'd like to add comma and the city council, as it would be with any other department of the city. And that's in the form of a motion.
Okay, motion and second. Any discussion on the amendment? Amendment to add "and city council" on the end of 13-113, section 1. Any discussion on that? Okay, please press your selection to add "and city council" under financial affairs. Madam Clerk, sorry. Mr. Wallace, okay, Mr. Wallace, there we go. Okay, motion to add city council is approved, the amendment. Okay. Anyone else? Have you hit? Okay. Ms. Johnson? Candy Johnson, I'm sorry.
If those of you that were here at the last working session I had brought up an issue as far as the oversight about involving a council member being appointed by the mayor to the power board to serve as an ex officio member. I asked for that ordinance to be drafted, but I didn't get it until today sometime, and I noticed that there was a tie for postponement. And I have a problem with this because I don't feel like I am able to represent my constituents and the desires to have more oversight and involvement from the council on the power board. And in an email today received from Lance Baker, I question why the amendment that I wanted to bring forth to the council wasn't sent out earlier so that you guys would have an opportunity to read it and ask questions of Lance. And this is the part where I don't feel comfortable with this proposed ordinance. It says the proposed amendment to the city code regarding CDE and the power board is legislation that is sponsored by the mayor. Therefore, the version to be presented is as the mayor has requested it. Well, I don't feel like the amendment that I've asked for has even had an opportunity to be considered. So I want to request to amend Section 13-103 for membership to change the membership of the power board by adding a city council member on there, and you should have a copy as an ex officio member. That way they can also provide reports to the council as every other committee does.
Okay. Mr. Baker, would you want to address that? She wants to make an amendment to add city council. There's going to have to be some other changes. This is the procedure to do that, is to make your amendment here. So do you want to well, I'm not sure she can do it with 7 members.
Well, I'll tell you, this is a complicated thing. It's not as simple as I think you may think. The state statute says that which was enacted in 1935, says that the mayor and the city council, upon their approval, shall appoint or if they create a power board, shall appoint the members, and the membership shall consist of either 2 members or 4 members. And then the next section says that in addition to the 2 or 4, the mayor, upon vote or approval of the city council, may also appoint a member of the city council to the board so that you have a total of 3 or 5, all right? And our charter, however, says, and I've forgotten the section number, but I can give it to you, says that and that's, our board was created pursuant to that private act charter that was enacted after the 1935 Act. And that says that the Utility Supervisory Board can have 3 to 7 members. All right? So as long as you can't violate the charter. So if you want to have a board with 5 members, one of whom is a city council member, you can do that. If you want to have a power board with 3 members, one of whom is a city council member, you can do that. Because there's an infinite number of varieties, I didn't draft it, all the different permissible possibilities. And I'll just be quite honest with you, Frank, I'm a one-man shop, and I've had a lot on my plate.
Oh, I'm sure, but I requested it after the last meeting and never got a response back until today when I emailed again.
That's because
and
I
asked-
didn't even finish the mayor's, the version that the mayor asked for until
That's fine.
Yesterday, last night. And we didn't even weren't able to sit down and go over it because he was gone yesterday until today. So I sent it to you as soon as I could. And this ain't the only thing I've had going on, to say the least. And so, if you want to do that, then you just need to make a motion and see if the votes are there to pass it. And if you win, then I've got the language drafted to do it as you want to do it.
What would be
5 members, 3-year terms, and one of those members being a city council member.
So would that be your motion, Ms.
Yes.
Johnson? Second. Okay, there's a motion to amend section 13-103, item number A, to read, the electric power board shall be composed of 4 members and 1 city council member. Is that correct, Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Okay. That's the motion on the floor, and it's duly seconded. Ms. McLaughlin, you want to address the motion?
Yeah, I have something else, but no. I have something on this.
Okay, Ms. McLaughlin.
So Lance, okay, just so I'm keeping up with this. With the makeup that we have now with 7 members, one of those 7 members could not be an ex officio city council member? Okay.
No. I don't believe legally you can do that. And the reason why is because if you're going to appoint a city council member, you can only do it because the state statute authorizes it. And it only authorizes it in relation to 2 or 4 board members.
Okay.
So you can have 3 or 5, which includes a city council member.
Mhm.
You can't, and there's nothing in the charter that says 3 to 7 members for these supervisory boards. There's nothing in there that authorizes you to appoint a city council member to that board, to the electric power board.
What if okay, so here's another question on that. If Ms. Johnson's amendment passes, is it appropriate for a council member to receive the pay that a board member would, or would they be serving in an ex officio capacity and there would be no additional pay?
I don't believe they could receive the pay.
Okay, good.
Okay, Mr. Allen?
My comment and concern, Mayor, is not pertaining to the amendment.
Okay, we'll
So I
move
will
on.
hold off.
Okay, thank you.
And
Mr. Harris, in reference to the amendment.
Yes, Mayor, and again to Mr. Baker, it's pretty confusing. One minute you mention a state statute, which was enacted one year, and the state charter came after that, which took it out of, you reference quite a bit, this whole change, everything was state statute, state statute, state statute. But when we discuss membership, you're referring to charter, which has precedence. Is it the state?
You have to comply with both, Councilman.
Okay.
And if you can comply with both. But there are some situations where they conflict. And where that happens, if it's a direct conflict, then the later enacted law controls, and that is the charter.
So, okay, I'm with you.
Right.
So what you're saying, all these changes we made, that was due to the confliction, all the conflicts we've had. That's why we're making these changes right now. That's what this document is. It's clarifying some conflicts, and this is one that we're trying to clarify also, but you're referring or resorting back to the charter, but everything else you're going back to the state statute.
I don't understand what you're saying.
I'm saying
What your
the
question
reason
is.
for this document is to update everything. That's what we're doing.
That's right.
And I'm saying this would just be another update. We
That's
have
right.
a conflict. We have a
You're
conflict
right.
here.
You're right. You're right. There's no issue about changing the number. All right. You can change the number, But if you're gonna change the number, it still has to come within the charter. You can't just ignore the charter. But you can change that number to make it match what the statute says, which is 3 or 5, to include one council member. You can do that, all right? And, that may be a good thing, all right? And we have in fact done that with a lot of this other stuff. But what you can't do, you can't change the term, because there's a direct conflict between what's in the charter and what the state statute says. State statute says 4 years. Charter says cannot be more than 3, all right? But what you're saying is, and that's why I'm telling Ms. Johnson here that there's no reason why she can't make her motion.
Okay, Mr. Summers?
Lance,
Yes, sir.
let's say we go with 5, one of them being a council member.
Yes, sir.
Does that member have to be a non-voting member per state law, or could that member then be a voting member if we're reverting to state law? I'm asking, can they be a voting member by state law if you go with the 5?
He is a member, according to the state law, just like the other members are, has the same powers, duties, obligations. He can vote.
Yeah, if we go by the state law version, 3 or 5.
Well, that's the only way you can do it.
Okay, that's what I'm asking. Okay,
Because,
so-
municipalities cannot act except to the extent that they're given power to act by the state legislature, okay? That's like Dillon's rule, okay? That's just the basic law of municipal law. And so, the only thing that authorizes you to create this board in the first place is the municipal electric plant law, together with our charter. Our charter puts a gloss on it, all right?
Right.
Which there's been case law that says that's okay.
Yeah.
They can do that.
The clarification is they would just become a council member would become a voting member if we go to the 3 or 5
That's
situation.
right, because
Okay.
it doesn't say that they're non-voting or,
Okay.
they're a full-fledged member.
Okay, that's good. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Hey, Jeff?
Lance, I know a while ago you said something about the bonds. If we change the setup of the board, does that affect the bonds?
I didn't look at it, and I don't think so. Because all it says is, board means the Clarksville Electric Power Board. It doesn't talk about what the membership number is or anything like that. I don't think that's gonna matter. I mean, I'll tell you, it's not gonna matter.
Okay, thank you. Okay, you have in front of you a motion to amend Section 13-103. I'm sorry, Mr. Lewis, I'm sorry, I missed you.
I just wanted to know, if this was approved, when would it go into effect?
Upon publication, right?
Okay, so I guess my
That's
next.
tonight's second reading.
Okay, so I guess my question would be, the 2 people, or actually 3 people that would go away to get it down to.
Oh, you mean if her amendment passes? Oh, you gotta look at the language.
Yeah, it's like
specific
2012.
language. There's a transition. There'll have to be a transition, all right? Because you can't just say, okay, we're gonna change this, all of a sudden, and now they're just booted off.
Okay.
I mean, you could do that, but you're gonna open yourself up to a lawsuit, all right? So, the language that I've sent to Ms. Candy Johnson contains a way to get to that 4+1 council member status over time as the existing board members, their terms expire.
Like for attrition.
Exactly.
Okay, is that it, Mr. Lewis?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Ed?
Yes, sir, Mayor. I mean, I don't see a reason to vote yes on this amendment because the meetings are all open and the council member that would like to go there, I think is allowed to just sit there if they want to. And I think even if the mayor even asks a council member maybe to go, they won't have the title ex officio member, but they can be there and maybe even report back to the council without jeopardizing any type of legal ramifications that
They
the
could
city
attend
attorney
every
told us
power
about.
board meeting just like any other person of the public.
Yeah.
They can't vote.
Okay, thank you. Okay, you have a motion in front of you to amend 13-103, amending your power board from 7 members to 5 members. That's what you're voting for. Press yes to amend it to 5, no to leave it at 7. Okay, amendment fails. Okay, Wallace, are you on again? No. I'm sorry, Mr. Allen, I'll let you go first, and let me, okay, I'll get Mr. Allen, and I'll get, it's Deanna and you.
Mayor, we changed the section 113 pertaining to budget reporting and debt.
Yes, sir.
And added the city council. My question, having served on the power board before and knowing what it entails, by us having to approve the budget or so forth, what about amendments? If we approve the budget and they say, okay, well, we need X amount, we need something else, then we'd have to have a special meeting in order for the amendment?
Mr.
To amend
Becker.
their budget. And if that's the case, that's unrealistic. I mean, that's micromanaging the group that's there. That's ridiculous.
That was what Ms. McLaughlin's amendment did essentially. Okay, it passed in that last sentence of section 113A1, the total appropriation approved by the board and the city council shall not be exceeded without prior approval of the board, and her amendment added, and the city council.
Okay, so can we add something else in there, putting a cap in there, whereas they won't have to come back? Substation blows up, something happens drastically.
Something to
We
the
gotta
fact.
have a special city council meeting.
You mean like, say, the total appropriation approved by the
That's
board and city
ridiculous.
council shall not be exceeded without prior approval of the board, and for amounts over $50,000 by the city council.
Now, that's no money with dealing with electricity.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying,
Yeah,
that's the kind of
yeah.
language you're talking about,
Yeah,
right?
that's the kind of language I'm talking about.
You could amend her, you could amend
You're
it
welcome.
again if you want.
Right now, what you have is it's no longer, it's an amended item, but you can amend 13-113, Section 1, to say whatever you want to. If the vote is there, it's what it'll be. So what, would you like to put a dollar amount in there?
500,000.
Sir?
500,000.
Okay. The total appropriation approved by the board and the city council shall not be exceeded without the prior approval of the board and city council
Without prior,
unless it exceeds 500,000?
without prior approval of the board, comma, and for amounts greater than 500,000 by the city council. Is that okay?
Is that your intent?
That's my intent.
Okay. Okay, so there's a motion to add the 500,000 as the minimum of which the involvement of the city council would be. Is there a second to that? Second. Okay, now you're discussing Mr. Allen's. Ms. McLaughlin, is that what you want to discuss? Okay, well, I'm going to put you on it.
Okay.
Anyone else, excuse me just a second, Mayor.
My intent.
Ms. McLaughlin, excuse me.
Sorry.
Anyone else that has pressed your button, if that's what you want to address, if it's not what you want to address, please take it off when we'll take you to the next issue. Ms. McLaughlin.
Okay, my intent with the amendment was to make it more in line with other city departments. Any other city department that has a budget amendment, we have to vote on it. That way we're aware of it, what it's for and whatnot. It makes us a little more consistent. That was my intent. You know, when you pass a budget, you try and stick to it. If something happens, yes, there are things that you may need to do a budget amendment, but I think that we should be able to have approval on it, just like we would if Gas and Water had a budget amendment, or the fire department, or the police department.
Okay. Okay, you're off. I'm gonna let Mr. Burkhart go, and then hit your button, Mr. Allen.
What is the budget at CDE this year?
$6 million. How much?
150 million?
I missed that a little bit, didn't I? Okay, 250.
150?
How much is it, Kim?
150.
150.
Is that capital and all? How much? Capital and all, okay, capital. That's big. I didn't hear her. 150.
150 million.
Go ahead, Wayne. He's chairman of the board.
I hate
Quickly.
to check this, but just for information purposes,
just so you may know, TVA is going from quarterly fuel cost adjustments to monthly. So you're going to have a meeting of minimum, a special call meeting of minimum of once a month just to deal with that. And that's going to be way more than $500,000 swing.
Wouldn't have to be special call.
That's just information purposes, so you know what you're voting.
And let's see, we can only discuss that amendment, but the difference between the power board and other departments, the difference between Clarksville Department of Electricity and other departments is you do have that other level, that other layer, and that's the power board layer. The other departments don't have that. We are that layer. Your power board is the layer that you're requesting for your oversight of the CD that you've given authority to. Tonight you've given line item authority. The thing that I would suggest to you is that we recognize there was a problem. We all recognize that. That's why we're here. We recognize there's a problem. We also determined a way to fix that problem. That is to empower the power board to be able to have greater oversight of the superintendent and the line item veto of their budget. I would suggest we might look at allowing that to work before we try to create something that may not even be needed. If you would allow what we're suggesting here tonight to work and allow them to report to you on a quarterly basis, on a semi-annual basis, we already have it tightened up to where they're reporting to the Director of Finance on a monthly basis. Give some trust and confidence in your power board. We've given them the authority to go deeper. That was what was lacking before. Give them the authority to have oversight on management and financial responsibilities and oversight of financial affairs. Give it a chance to work, and then if it does not work, then we can bring them back and rein them in. You can delete them. You can add additional restrictions on. I would suggest that we allow it to work. That's what started out on this. Is set some criteria up to allow the process to work with your power board. Okay, I've got Mr. Burkhart. I have Mr. Summers. Mr. Johnson, how about you? You're third. Mr. Harris?
Yes, Mayor.
And you're on this motion over here, sir. $500,000.
Okay. Is that $500,000 pertaining to each occurrence or yearly? What is the $500,000? You mentioned that's just fees in the bucket pretty much to the electric department. So my question is that based on events or is that?
It's because it opens up the avenue for a lot of other things. And when you don't really understand what goes on, then you could be setting yourself up for failure. You could be setting yourself up to do something that you really didn't know that it entailed.
Okay, Ms. Barbara Johnson?
Well, Mayor, I thought we was offered this $500,000. I was going to suggest, can I go somewhere else?
No, ma'am, we're discussing the $500,000 still,
Okay,
so.
Okay, when we get through with this, I want to make a suggestion.
Please, and you hit the button again. Mr. Ed on the $500,000? Mr. Summers on the $500,000?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Currently, the council meets twice a month, it is, in our work session and our regular session right there. The other thing is, Wayne had mentioned rate adjustments. Now, we have rate adjustments in gas every month, and we don't go changing the budget on that. Could a rate adjustment in electricity be similar to what we do in gas, and that it's just it's a pass-through, basically, isn't it?
Well, I don't believe the council ever sees gas and water's budget again. It's an enterprise fund. It's a little bit different than your general fund. It's contingent upon rate payment, and so the budget fluctuates. We had a mild summer, so rates were down, but so were expenses. So the budget is a very fluid thing, same way with gas and water. I don't believe this council ever sees a gas and water budget after it's approved each fiscal year because it is an enterprise fund. Now, I could be wrong, and other people here can speak to that more intelligently than me. But I believe consistency, if the council is looking for some sort of consistency, I think it would be more in line with how you treat gas and water, initial approval of the budget, and they don't come back again. But I would defer to these folks sitting behind
Ben and/or is Pat Hick here? Ed, you okay.
Mayor, I don't know that, obviously I haven't seen a budget amendment come back my understanding is that the gas and water budget has not changed enough to be required to come back. The internal auditor, Lynn Stokes, and I were looking at the ordinance. We believe that if there was a substantial change in the gas and water budget, that under our ordinances, they would in fact be required to get it approved.
That's what I was thinking too. It's,
Okay, Mr. Ed?
I just wanted to point out too, and we have the Gas and Water Committee that they have to report to every month as well.
But they have the Power Board committee every month. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I would suggest, and it's on the $500,000. I would suggest that we reconsider allowing the Power Board the authorization to try to work through the details. I said a moment ago, we recognize the problem. We're trying to correct the problem by giving additional oversight of the Power Board, and then we're saying the Power Board, and by the way, we're going to take that back. Yes, sir, Mr. Allen.
If we're going to reconsider, then I will withdraw my motion.
If you're going to reconsider
If we're
what?
going to reconsider. But if we're not going to reconsider,
Okay.
then,
Okay. If you want to withdraw your motion, you'll have plenty of time to make it if you want. Okay, the sponsor is withdrawing the motion on the $500,000. Is there any reconsideration on the previous amendment that was approved on adding the city council to 113, section 1? Anybody can make that motion. Mr. Harris? Let's get Mr. Harris on there, and I'll get you.
I would just like to make a comment to support that motion. I remember several years ago when Mr. Spraglin came before the council, and there was many things discussed, but one of the main things that he did that I totally disagreed with was when he put the complete city council name and phone number on the postcard, well, matter of fact, on the CDE bill, if I'm not mistaken. And when he did that, I said to him that business venture in reference to the business enterprise of cable and so forth, I just felt that it wasn't fair for him to put the council in the middle of it to be contacted. My point is, the board wasn't on those placard cards that were mailed out, which makes me say that me being an elected official, that I'm the one that's responsible, or I'm the one who's going to be contacted with any issue with the CDE. With that being said, I accept that responsibility just as any other department, such as gas and water. So I think this department here should follow the same guidelines, and we should leave the city council involved in that budget and approval.
Okay, thank you. In order to reconsider a motion that has been passed in the meeting of which we're speaking, a person on the prevailing side must make the motion to reconsider the amendment adding the city council. So if that person who voted yes to add the city council is willing to offer that as reconsideration, you can make the motion now. Candy Johnson?
Which amendment are you talking about?
On the one that Ms. McLaughlin asked, Johnson, Ms. McLaughlin's amendment that passed that said that she wanted to add the city council as part of the approval process on section 113-1. If you voted for that, then you can make a motion to reconsider that amendment. Okay, thank you. Anyone who voted for it, willing to reconsider? Okay. Mr. Wallace?
I was not on that side, but I'd like to move again to postpone consideration of this ordinance. I think that there are a lot of moving parts here that I'm concerned about, and I think we might want some more input and really might want to put some more thought into this. I don't think anyone's prejudiced by doing that. I think we're setting a bad precedent here by bringing something up, getting something 24 hours before second reading that is substantially different than what it was on first reading. So we've had this for 24 hours, and it's not really like, it's not a regular second reading because it is substantially different. So I'd make that motion.
Motion second to postpone. Any discussion on postponement? Jeff, postponement?
Yes, I agree with Joel. We just had it just a little while. Even the mayor has said, to let it work. Well, that's 30 more days to let it work like it's going. let's see, but I don't think tonight is pressing to do that.
I think the problem is that you're letting it work without setting some criteria up. Mr. Red?
Well, first, we already voted on postponement tonight.
What is the
I guess
rule
it
on
could.
postponement on the initial motion, Mr. Baker? Okay, thank you.
And, well, while he's looking, if I may.
Yes, sir, Mr. Red.
In the meantime, too, it's an ordinance that can be changed. Once it's passed tonight, this isn't something that can come back in front of the council. Ordinances are changed throughout anyway, from month to month and from time to time as well, so. Although I voted for the postponement the first time, but now I'm thinking, having reconsiderations on that.
Thank you.
because we can change it later.
What's the urgency? Maybe we can discuss that. If there's an urgency, that would be something I would consider on changing the postponement. If there's an urgency.
While you're looking, the question,
I really don't think it's in the same motion again.
I wouldn't, I'm not going to rule,
I don't believe you can.
but it's already been motion postponed on that particular amendment, a particular motion. What you're ruling on, excuse me a second, what you're ruling, Mr. Baker, you're our parliamentary.
I don't think it's in
Okay.
the same exact motion again. It's already voted.
Okay, so the parliamentarian has ruled that it would be out of order. And so moving on. Ms. Johnson?
I move that we refer to a committee this ordinance.
Second.
Which
Make
committee?
one to study it, the Standards and Finance Committee, since you can't do the postponement.
There's a motion on the floor to move to.
Refer to a committee,
Which committee?
the Finance Committee.
Okay. Motion on the floor to refer it to the Finance Committee. Mr. Summers, you want to speak to the,
Well, we were talking about you can't postpone the exact same thing, and it was postponement for 30 days. What if we could just get 2 more weeks out of this thing?
Bill, I think the ruling has been if you can't postpone it, if they wanted 30 days or 60 days or 2 weeks, it probably should have been part of that. That's the ruling of the parliamentarian. You can ask, what about that? Would you like to address that, Mr. Baker? There's still a question about postponement.
You got to vote on it.
What, excuse me, better than that, I'm sorry, I think we're going to need to go ahead and discuss the motions on the floor, and then if you want to add something after that, how about that? Okay, Mr. Red?
The motion on the floor
Is to send it to Finance and
to
Administration
committee.
Committee.
Well, again, for the same reason, I would be against that. And of course, the question's been asked, what is the hurry? Maybe I'm the only one that's read the paper in the last month or so. And this is, what's the hurry since 1935 till now? This is something that should have been done maybe a few years ago, have some more oversight. And again, I think it's a step in the right direction, and I think we need to get to the main body of this issue tonight. And again, if there's some part of the ordinance that's not perfect, there's some word that's not just exactly right. We always amend ordinances that's been passed over the last years, ever since I've been on this council. I've amended ordinances myself that were written long before I got here. So, I mean.
I believe you've been ordinances that night of the ordinance, I think.
I
Wally.
think so, yeah. But,
Thank you.
but
Okay,
for
thank
me,
you.
there is somewhat of a hurry.
Okay, it is a matter that needs to be addressed from a financial affairs matter of the Clarksville Department of Electricity. Mr. Allen?
I'm just speaking in opposition to it going to committee. I mean, it's something we all have to discuss. It's all been brought up. And for you to pick a committee, everybody still wants to be involved. Everybody still has questions. And so, this is something the council needs to handle. And whether we put it off, whether you handle it tomorrow, the next day, it's still going to be the same long discussion. It's still going to be the same questions asked. I mean, we just got to deal with it.
Okay. Ms. Barbara Johnson?
Well, it's about time. The mayor?
Yes, ma'am.
We have been discussing this now, I know, for 45 minutes. And I am making a motion to let CDE work on this for a year, see how they go about it, and if things don't work out the way that we feel it should, then it comes back to the council. Can I
Okay.
get a motion on that?
Okay, hold on a second. Ms. Johnson, I'd be
Yes.
glad for you to address that you have a motion on the floor currently to send this back to committee. So we must dispose of that first, and then we'll come back and address you. Mr. Lewis?
I need to wait, Mayor.
Okay, Mr. Grubbs?
I'm just gonna support what Councilman Red said. Let's get it done.
Okay, Candy Johnson?
I was just gonna call for the question.
Okay, thank you. Question call for. Okay, so what you have a motion by Ms. Johnson, duly seconded, I think, by Mr. Harris, is that right? Yes. Somebody. Yeah. To send ordinance 27 to Finance Administration Committee. Yes to send it back, no not to send it to the Finance Committee. Please. No, that's all right. Okay, yes to send it back to committee, no not to send it back to committee. Ms. Red? Okay, motion fails. Ms. Johnson, would you like to make a motion?
I make a motion that we allow CDE to work with this for a year to see how they can come about getting it together and then come back to us if things have not worked out the way we hoped for.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Is that calling for the question?
Okay. Ms. Johnson, how about if you'll let me try to expand on it a little bit. Are you saying, please don't let me put words in your mouth, but are you saying that you would like to call for the question of the existing motion and add No, you can't add the amendment to that. You're trying to amend the motion to require the Power Board and Clarksville Department of Electricity to operate under the ordinance that's proposed and report back to the council in 12 months.
Yes.
That's the motion. Is there a second? Here,
After 12 months, I would second that.
sir.
12 months.
What?
Call for the question.
What do you? Excuse me, Mr. I got Mr. Red, and then Mr. Allen. I'll hit you. Wallace, what are you saying?
If you just take out the 12-month part of that, and then just call it a call for the question. I'm
Ms.
with
Johnson,
you.
they're asking if you would be willing to amend your motion to just call for the question. Exclude the 1 year and call for the question on the motion.
Second.
Second. Okay, thank you. Okay, so what you have, Ms. Johnson, Candy Johnson, you want to speak? Okay, well, let me tell you what's happened is they've called for the question on the motion as amended by Ms. McLaughlin's amendment. And they're calling for the vote of ordinance 27 as amended. Okay?
Vote on, cease discussion.
Okay. Okay, we're gonna vote. So, ma'am? She's calling for the question. So those in favor of cease discussion, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay.
Now we're on the.
Pardon? One nay for Mr. I tell you what. Please press your button. If you want to cease discussion, press yes. If you want to continue on, press no. You ready, Madam Clerk? Please press yes to cease discussion. Candy Johnson? Okay. Motion approved to cease discussion. What you have in front of you is a ordinance 27 as amended that you have amended tonight. And it's it's a motion and duly seconded. Please press your selection. Yes to approve ordinance 27, no to disapprove it. As amended. let's see here. Okay. Ordinance 27 is approved as amended. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, in front of you is ordinance 30, under new business, authorizing the exercise of eminent domain to obtain easements and right-of-ways for the rails to trails. This is the right-of-way acquisition for the end of Pollard Road, and then also setting aside future right-of-way, future right-of-ways for expansion of rails to trails. Make a motion to approve. Second. Any discussion? Those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed. Ordinance 30 is approved. Okay, Mr. Burkhart, you want to handle number 4? It is not, and it is now, though. Thank you for...
Thank you. Also, I've done a lot of research on this, and almost every city, every major city in Tennessee has a runoff. Chattanooga, Knoxville, Jackson, Nashville. And I think that Clarksville has gotten to the point to where it's large enough that we need to have a runoff election also. And there's been several, I've had several things as the week went on by talking to different cities. They all do it 100 different ways. And I would ask for your approval on this.
There's a motion. Is there a second? Second. And second by Mr. Harris. Any discussion, Mr. Harris?
Yes, I would like to start off by saying during the working session there was a lot of misunderstanding. I first would like to apologize to Councilman Grubbs. I made a comment and we got into an argument discussing the financial responsibility of the city, and my argument was that the city wouldn't encounter any more expenses. My belief and the reason for saying that was the major point was voters were going to be out voting in August anyway. Then November could actually be the runoff. We could add the mayor's race onto the ticket with the county. So what I was misunderstood on and was the fact that in August the city doesn't pay anything. So I guess, Ms. Coleman, maybe you can help me out. How much would the city encounter if we were to participate with just one individual on the ballot during the August election?
Hi, Ms. Coleman.
How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Ms. Coleman.
There is currently an agreement with the city and the election commission that they pay 25% of the November general, with the city ballot being on there. So that would be a discussion that would have to take place.
What about the August election?
It may very well be the same. I mean, but there is no agreement. There is nothing at this point. So it's really not a good answer to that right now.
So I guess my main question is...
But there would be cost.
There would be cost. In the past, the November's election, the cost is, what's the cost average?
Let me get that. The past November 2008, total cost was $111,692. And of that, the city share was 25%, which was $27,923. Go back 2 years to the last city election, the total cost was $70,028, and the city share would be $17,507.
Those numbers are based on the participation of voters? That's where that number is coming from?
Not necessarily. There are some inherent costs that you have regardless of whether 2 people show up or 200,000 people show up. I mean, the one major difference between 06 and 08 is 08 is a presidential election, which obviously involves the larger the volume, yes. So it does to some extent as far as the number of voting machines, obviously the number of voting machines runs the number of poll workers. One difference between another difference between '06 and '08 is, the poll workers' pay was increased. In '06 and for probably 10 years prior to that, a poll worker, was paid $75 for the day, which is a minimum of 13 hours, which is very low. So we increased that to $100 for the '08 cycle, and which at least got us to minimum wage. But after minimum wage was increased, I still think we may be below that now. So that was one difference that you'll have, the bigger cost involved between '06 and '08, along with presidential, and of course the increase in all cost.
Matter of fact, Ms. Coleman, that's a great point, because the election that's in question that we're talking about adjusting will not be a presidential year. The city mayors is on the opposite of the presidential election. So every 2 years, when there's the presidential election, the mayor's election is 2 years. So we wouldn't encounter the higher amount of the 27,000. It would probably approximately be the lower amount at the 17,000. You're just using those numbers. I would hate for the council to sit here and use the presidential numbers, and the truth be told, we need to be concentrating on that odd year of election, which for the mayor's race, because that's the amount we will encounter, is my comment.
I have not actually ever received a copy of the resolution, but it was my understanding that it included the mayor and the council. So that includes it at every election, every 2 years.
I ran here on president, right?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Okay, wait just a second. Mr. Summers?
I'm just gonna make a motion, so if you've got a question for her, I don't.
Well, hold on a second. Mr. Red?
I'll wait.
Mr. Grubbs?
Ms. Coleman,
Yes, sir.
Councilman Burkhart referred to Nashville as having a runoff. Do you have any statistics about their runoff, say, going back several years from the time they have the election, and then I know they have a runoff? What's the percentage of people that vote up there?
Let me also state that the major cities do have runoff provisions,
Yes, ma'am.
as Mr. Burkhart said, but their election is not in conjunction with the November general.
Because in Metro, they run every 4 years.
What I call an off year, meaning an odd year election, not in conjunction with any other state or
ma'am.
county election. Their turnouts in Davidson County, their elections are in, for example, in August, they have anywhere between a 34 to 45% turnout average in the main election, and then their runoffs are anywhere between 8 and 15%.
So a lot less people come to the runoff and vote. So is
And
that,
and they only have one election every 4
4
years
years.
because they don't have staggered terms.
is there any state law dealing with runoffs as far as the governor's race or our state legislators? Do they have to run off?
There are no runoff elections unless you have a charter government, and that, the majority of that is city. You can have a county that is
Right.
governed by a charter, but those would be the only way you can have a runoff election is
If
a
you got the
government
charter.
that's governed by a charter, which means no state or county unless it's a charter.
Thank you, ma'am.
Pardon me? They do, state officers have a primary.
Okay, Candy Johnson?
That is a partisan primary. Municipalities cannot have a partisan primary.
Candy?
Hi, Vicki. What are the trends with other cities and having council members in the runoff election that you're aware of? Like the trends, are there, from what I've seen online, I didn't see council members in a runoff election unless it was an at-large seat. Are you familiar with that?
It goes back and forth, and as Ms. Burkhart said, they run the gamut of differences. For example, Davidson counties, they have all of theirs. The district council, the vice mayor and the mayor is a 50% plus one, and then their 5 at-large council seats is 1/5 plus one is their majority.
So their council is not 50%.
Their at-large is 1/5 because they have 5 seats, and so it's the same thing, but it's just said differently. It varies.
Okay, thank you.
Some just include the mayor, and then some others include all of their officers.
Is it more expensive to do more candidates?
Well, as someone mentioned earlier, if you just do the mayor's race, that's once every 4 years. As opposed, if you put the council included, then you're hitting every 2 years because you have staggered terms, and your city election is every 2 years.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Summers?
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion. What Jeff's proposing is trying to amend the old charter. On the 15th of this month, the Charter Committee will meet again to talk about the proposed rewritten charter and its resubmission to the state. I'd like to make a motion to have this sent to the Charter Committee to look at.
There's a motion on the floor to send it to committee?
Yes, sir. To
Any,
borrow a phrase
is there a
from her
second? Okay, second by Mr. Redd. You're going to vote, you're going to discuss now about the motion to send this to Charter Revision Committee. Any discussion about that? Ms. Candy Johnson, is that what you want to discuss? Okay, thank you. Hold on, I'm trying to get it there, I'm sorry. He did get this. Okay, thank you.
Okay, wasn't this same issue already sent to the Charter Committee?
It was discussed once, yeah.
Okay.
But,
So why is it that we can't discuss it amongst us, kind of like we did with CDE? We decided on that tonight. What's the difference?
Because CDE's not going to the State Assembly for approval.
We can change it anytime we want to.
Okay, Mr. Harris? Did you want to speak about the amendment, about the motion?
What's the motion?
The motion is to send it to committee.
Yes. Matter of fact, again, the council, here we are making a decision right now. Why would we send it back to the committee? I understand, well, let me rephrase that. I understand why you're saying send it back to the committee. But my point is, we're the elected officials. If we adopt it right now, then we know when it goes back to the committee, it's done. From the wishes of the elected officials that's representing the citizens of Clarksville. Because this is an issue that's been brought up by citizens. This is not councilman-based, pretty much, and councilwoman-based, council member-based, and mayor-based, but this is citizen-based. So why would we let it go back to a committee, something that we could approve and agree to right now? Or, I tell you what, that I was just replying to, making a comment, but I would like to make a motion, Mayor, if I.
There's a motion on the floor unless you, we'll have to dispose of the motion on the floor. Mr. Redd?
Yeah, I can answer that, Mayor.
Okay.
One thing, this is a resolution. This is one vote, and that's one thing the resolutions scare me. We don't have the second one to come back on. And this is a charter change. Like I've spoke of before, if it's an ordinance that we change from time to time, and I've changed many myself, I can't change this unless it's a 2/3 majority vote. And there's some things that I think that I would like to consider in here. Basically, maybe, why can't this be an ordinance that maybe we can talk about?
Okay, Mr. Redd, we're talking about sending it to committee.
That's what I'm talking about as well, Mayor. I'm getting to that.
Okay, thank
About
you. Well,
why we should send this to committee is because this is a resolution, not an ordinance. It won't be a second reading. That's why maybe we should take a look at this in the.
I think you're kind of threading that needle a little bit, but.
Well, I'm just making an argument why this should be going to committee. There's some things too in this that I think that the committee should look at, because there's some changes that I would like to see too. And Ms. Coleman brought those up, maybe separating the votes from the council to the mayor, but I think it should go to the committee.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Summers?
I guess answering Mark's question, if we approve it here, it doesn't go to committee, it goes on up to the state. So you bypass the committee, and then you're amending the old charter.
Okay, Candy Johnson?
Call for the question.
Questions called for. Before we call for question, you have Mr. Groves that was on there. Mr. Harris, you can't answer the questions called for. And I don't know if there's a second. Second. Okay, so Mr. Groves, you'll be able to talk. You were on the list before she called for the question.
Bill, in your opinion, if it goes back to committee and then the committee makes recommendations, if it comes back before the council, we're going to vote either up or down on it anyway, correct?
You want to hit your button, Mr. Forrest, Mr. Summers?
Well, I wasn't finished with my question.
Actually, I'm not sure that your comments, you need to complete your comments. Question's been called for, so Bill will have to end it there.
And the timeline's going to be the same. It's not going to get to the General Assembly before January anyway. whether it goes through committee or.
Okay.
I know.
Well,
I'm
the
just
question
making
been
a
called
general
for, we're going to
statement.
follow that rule.
Making a statement.
Okay, the question's been called for, and to cease discussion. Those in favor of ceasing discussion, press your selection yes to cease discussion on on this amendment only. Yeah. You're ceasing discussion on the amendment of Mr. Summers. Yes to cease discussion on Mr. Summers' amendment. One more. Ms. Johnson? Okay. Motion is approved to cease discussion. So what you're voting on now is the motion to send it back to committee. Okay? So now you're back on discussion of sending it back to committee. Any discussion? You ready to vote? Press yes to send it back to Charter Revision Committee. No to continue discussing. Okay, we're going to continue discussing. What you have in front of you is Resolution 17, that's asking for a runoff with 50% plus one vote. It's time to vote. Well, you have some people here that want to talk. Mr. Harris?
I guess this would be the time now, Mayor. I would like to make an amendment to remove all council members out of this ordinance that Mr. Burkhart have requested.
Now, you do know I'm a member of the body. Yeah, I'm a member of the body. I'm the group of 13.
But the title, I'm making a motion to remove city councilmen out of the...
That's the transparency I was talking about that night. So there's a motion to delete all city council members excluding the mayor.
In reference to Mr. Baker, what I'm getting at is, if there's going to be a runoff, we've discussed this on Thursday, and that's why I'm making this motion.
Okay, Mr. Ed?
Yes, sir, Mayor. I think that, and I had something similar to maybe not to delete the city council from this and just leave the mayor there, but to vote on them separately, and that's why I wanted to take it to committee. But
Okay.
we can always vote on it separate in any case at a later date if today we do take out so I'll second the motion.
Okay, motion second. Mr. Summers?
Well, just to let you know, I guess since 1994, 3 of the 4 races for mayor would have gone to a runoff, and 19 council races would have gone to a runoff. So that's what you're looking at. But, what's good for one may be good for all of us. So, I wouldn't, we all jump in the pot together.
Mr. Allen?
I was just listening to the statistics that Ms. Coleman gave, and it appears to me that if there's, say, 5 candidates, and I vote for candidate 5, well, my candidate is not in the top 2. Well, it appears that, based on the numbers, that those that voted for 5 just don't go back and vote at all anyway. I mean, so it still doesn't make sense. And even if I have to go back and vote for candidate 1, that's still not my first choice. So either way, I'm gonna say, well, I really didn't want him anyway. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me at all. I just think you go vote, you win, lose, or draw, you place your vote, and don't add any additional cost for the people running. And as I said on last week, it's expensive enough to run for office. And with this runoff thing, which basically kind of sets it up where those who have plenty of money will have a better chance than those who don't have the resources. And I don't think that's what running for public office should be all about.
Okay, Jeff?
To answer Candy's question from earlier, Knoxville, Chattanooga, and Jackson all are mayor only. I think maybe Knoxville is city judge. Metro Nashville is the only one that I found that done council members also.
Mark?
Again, Mayor, I want to remind the council, that's what we're discussing pretty much, is just discussing excluding the council due to the fact of, in reference to a runoff.
Okay. Yes, sir, that's where we're at, that's what this motion is.
Right. The reason why I said that, to exclude the council, was to, seem like the discrepancy of the issue is pertaining to the mayor's race, not the council race. The council, we're elected in a ward, but the mayor race is elected citywide. So that's why the importance of this is a little different, because I'm hearing a lot of council members compare the council with the mayor's seat, but there's a big difference of someone needing support in a ward, which is 1/12, versus citywide, and that's my point for excluding council members.
Just to make it legal, your motion needs to be worded to say ward alderman, because that's what he uses the term. And the mayor is, he may have been kind of joking a while ago, but he's technically correct in that if you use the term councilman, it includes the mayor. So to achieve the purpose you want with your motion, you need to use the term ward alderman.
You agree to amend it to Ward Alderman in the second, I guess, did you
Yes.
second it, Candy?
Yes, thank you.
Or Wallace did. So, okay. Candy Johnson?
I just have a comment to what Councilman Allen is saying. What makes us much more special than Chattanooga or Knoxville or Jackson that we don't have to have a runoff? What makes us any better? That's just a comment.
Okay, Ms. McLaughlin?
I was going to call for the question.
Question's been called for. Is there a second? We have two people that's on the agenda to speak prior to the question. Mr. Red?
Yes, sir. Real quick, Mayor, I mean, the reason why I would be for this is, again, to separate this into two votes. I mean, these are two distinct offices. They have two, one runs the day-to-day operation of the city, and that should be a vote. And then we can come back at a later date and determine whether or not the city council person should have a runoff election as well, seeing that there could be some more costly, but we've heard from the head of the election commission or whatnot. But I think this should have been in a separate vote, with all due respects to Mr. Burkhart.
Okay. Mr. Lewis?
I was going to call for question.
It's called for. Okay. Those in favor of cease discussion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, what you're going to vote on now, right now, is the amendment. He's amending ordinance, resolution 17, so that the mayor is the only ones left in that resolution. He is amending out all ward aldermen. So if you want to amend out all ward aldermen, vote yes. If you want to leave it where everyone be considered, vote no. Please press your selection. Okay, motion fails. You have before you now Resolution 17 that has been presented by Mr. Burkhart, and there's a motion duly seconded to approve Resolution 17. If you want to pass Mr. Burkhart's motion of having runoffs, press. Mr. Ed?
I just had a question. Can I make an amendment from a resolution to an ordinance?
No, sir, that's his.
That's not I'm just asking, because
Done by resolution.
then it would have two
It
readings.
has to pass by 2/3 of the total membership of the city council. Because what you're doing here, as you know, you're
Right.
not actually changing the charter. You're asking if it
That's why it
passes,
has to be a
the
resolution.
local state legislative delegation to introduce legislation to amend the charter.
Okay.
And when it comes back, it has to be done either by referendum, and they could pass it up there to require a referendum, or it has to be passed when it comes back by a 2/3 vote of the city council. And case law has interpreted that to mean 2/3 of the entire membership. And if you will remember, back last year, our local legislative delegation said that they want it passed, and I think this is standard pretty much every time. They want the resolution, when it first comes to them, to pass by 2/3, because there's no point in them going and
Right.
if it passes by majority now, there's no point in them introducing it and it passing up there, and then it comes back and you don't have a 2/3, originally that passed it.
Now, does this document now reflect that the election would take place in the August time primary and then in November? That's, drafter, so I'm really gonna have to defer to Mr. Burkhardt.
Let's see, we've got several in front of you. Mr. Ed, are you through?
Well, I was just gonna ask as well if, Mr.
Who drafted your resolution, Mr. Murphy? You drafted the resolution? Okay, so I guess that's why some of those details are out, right? As to timing of the beginning of them and as to when.
Well, I was just
Mr.
gonna ask,
Baker, Go ahead, Wallace, I'm sorry.
for a motion to postpone till the next regular council meeting, if that's allowable, and if there's no objection from Mr. Burkhardt, so I could maybe take a look at that on my own without commitment.
Okay, there's motion to, and second, due to second to postpone Resolution 17. If you want to postpone it.
To the next regular council meeting.
To the next regular council meeting. If you want to postpone it, does anyone want to speak to the motion to postpone? Okay, I'm going to take you off. We'll start back over again. And so be sure and resubmit your name. If you want to postpone for until the next council meeting, vote yes. If you don't want to postpone it and want to handle it tonight, vote no. Please press your selection. Yes to postpone, no not to postpone. Okay, motion fails. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to speak, please press your button. And I would like to encourage you to try to get your point across in this. This could go on a long time, and I'm okay to stay here as long as you like, but it's becoming repetitive on your comments. So, Mr. Wallace?
I have a question for Ms. Coleman, if you wouldn't mind coming back up. I'm sorry to bring you back up. I've just kind of sat back and listened to everybody for a while, and it seems like the two main issues are, cost and low turnout. And I was reading something earlier today about, at least I think one of our counties has an instant runoff. Are you aware of that, where you would go in on election day, you would vote for your first choice, your second choice, and possibly your third choice then. It would not cost any more money. It deals with the turnout issue. Do you know anything about that? I mean, could our voting machines deal with that?
I do, but as far as I know, I don't think there's anything in Tennessee. I know there's not anything in Tennessee that allows that. There's other states that are.
I think Shelby County has it now. But do you think our machines could do that?
Okay, I wasn't aware of Shelby
Okay,
County did that. Probably so. I don't know that because it's not. I'd be very concerned if Shelby County did that because I think that would have to be. State law would have to allow that, and I don't know that it does. Currently, when you refer to machines, there passed last year the Tennessee Voter Confidence Act, which will require an optical scan system to be in place before the November general election of 2010. Unless that is delayed or repealed, there will be no more voting machines. So you will be actually voting on an optical scan paper ballot. So obviously you can,
But you think,
if that were permitted by state law, then you could rank your candidates any way you'd like.
okay, thanks.
A machine
Thank
wouldn't
you.
be dependent upon that.
Thank you, Vicki. Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Mr. Summers?
Just a couple of points. I guess one, what Joel mentioned, I could see statistically you could still wind up with nobody getting majority on that. You still have to have a runoff. But two other things here. Let's say if Jeff's thing passes, okay, and the charter committee is going to meet in 2 weeks, and then we include it in there. So then we've got an amendment to an old charter, and then we'll have it in the new charter. Both of them will hit the state assembly in January. So which carries precedence on something like that? And I guess the other thing is Jeff hasn't specified a timeline, and if the state assembly drags around and we don't find out an answer till May or June, does that go in effect for the next election? I mean, candidates are going to be picking up their paperwork for the city races around May, April, May is what I was thinking. Well, Vicki would know. April, May, right? and the thing is, if it wasn't on the books that there were runoffs, can you then change it sort of like in the middle of the stream, I guess?
The runoff, you wouldn't be picking up anything for it, but I mean, it affect, if your choice was to choose to not run, I mean, that might make a difference, but otherwise, I mean, you'll pick up petitions in May, the middle of May, qualifying deadlines, middle of August.
Well, I guess what I'm looking at is,
For the November
if it was May or June before the state gets back to us, then we've got to vote on it again, so that's another month possibly in there. So you may not have a final answer till July, maybe August, if it was really dragging around. And the election's just a few months away. So, I mean, is there a timeline that something like that has to be on the books before it's effective? Because basically, you're lining up candidates, and then you're changing the rules of the game after they're signing up. Is there something legally that affects that?
I don't think so. If you look at the language as you have before you, you know, there's a lot that's just, we don't know. All right, let's assume it passes tonight. It goes to the state legislature. You don't know when they're gonna pass it, if they pass it. But let's assume they pass it. It comes back. You don't know exactly when it's gonna come back, but assume it comes back at some point. And then you will have to vote again, and if it's passed again by 2/3 of the total membership, then at that point, that's when it becomes a part of our charter. And if that's before the next general municipal election, which is in November, I believe, of next year, then the runoff will apply.
Okay.
If it's not before then, it won't.
And going back to my other question,
You're right. I think what you're getting at here is, well, let's say it comes back and we pass it, but we don't pass it until, a week or two before the general municipal election in November. I can't tell you if there's any legal issues or problems with that, but it's certainly probably it may create practical problems for Ms. Coleman. I don't know. She'll have to answer to that.
Vicki, you have any answer for that? You're not sure what your answer is?
Obviously, there's a lot of planning that goes into an election, and so, yes, logistically, but there's no drop dead deadline that the law allows for that.
And just to be fair about it all, that the runoff obviously is not the general municipal election. That election will be in November regardless.
Right.
And according to the terms that's spelled out here, a runoff, if one is required, then will follow 5 weeks after that.
Right.
So you're gonna have some time.
Okay. Is that got you, Ms. Summers?
Thank you.
Thank you, Vicki. Mr. Burkhardt?
That's what I was gonna say, Lance, it's in the last paragraph, 5 weeks after.
5 weeks after.
And I think one thing that maybe we're missing here, if you win by 50+1 in the first round, there's no runoff. If you get 50% plus 1, there is no runoff. It's not an automatic runoff. If you win 50+1, it's over. If there's 10 candidates, you get 50+1, it's over.
If you have one candidate that has to have a special election, you gotta pay for a special election too.
Well, I'll take an amendment through August and November, we sit here and we spend money for different things, $500,000, $30 million at a time, a $25,000 election to have our elected officials with a 50% majority, I don't think it's too much to ask.
So if you have 13 people that's running for let's say the mayor and 12 council members, or 6 council members, and that's 7, and all 6 of those ran and they win by 50% or greater, you'll have a runoff for one city councilman.
Well, that runoff would be, like I said, I would take.
At the cost of whatever the cost may be.
Right. And but they do that in other cities too.
Okay. Vicki, you have a question? You have an answer? You have a comment?
Right. Right. Okay.
Yeah. It's 100% of the cost of $100,000, $127,000. Wait just a second. Ms. McLaughlin?
Call for the question.
Question, yes or no, and you're on the list. There's 5 ahead of you. This question been called for, and is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have 5 people in advance of that. So Candy Johnson, you're up.
Okay. Sounds like there's a lot of unanswered questions, and just looking at the votes, it looks like we have members on the council who don't want to support it. I think we need to be listening to the community and our constituents, and I would make a motion or move that we have a public hearing where the citizens can come out and talk about it, because it doesn't just affect us, it affects the people who we represent.
Okay, this question called for, excuse me, and you had the right to say that. What I may suggest there, if you want to have your community hearing, your community meeting, and have
Not just for my community, for the whole community.
that would be that'd be up to each of the council members to do that. You know, it should they so desire. But James Lewis.
Nothing there.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Mr. Grubbs.
Question for Ms. Coleman. If it's the way it's proposed, 5 weeks from November election, can you even be prepared and certified to have it? Can you
That's
expound on that a little bit?
Yes, sir. 5 weeks from the November 2nd, 2010 election would be December the 7th. With that Tennessee Voter Confidence Act that passed last year, it moves the certification deadline from the second Monday after the election to the third Monday after the election, because it also involves some random audits of precincts. With the precinct-based optical scan, we will be going back and auditing randomly drawn precincts to make certain that the counts are correct. And so that extends that period of time to do those audits. So the the last day to certify the November 2nd election would be November the 22nd. If December the 7th is your runoff election, early voting started 4 days before that. So you've got some real logistical problems in doing it exactly 5 weeks after the November general election.
And one last question. That would be a standalone, and it'd be 100% cost to the city.
Yes,
I think it'd cost approximately about $78,000 to have that election. If you take 70% of the cost, but
you could use a 70%
Cent.
number that you called me
That'd
earlier.
be about 78.
70% of your precincts, we have 24 precincts in Montgomery County, and 17 of them are in the city. So you're only leaving out 7 precincts. So that's a pretty close estimate.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Gross. Thank you again, Vicki. Mr. Ray, do you have a question for Ms. Coleman? No. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Just have a,
You're through,
but I
Mr.
did
Ray?
want to say something.
Yes, sir, you're on.
Okay. You know, I was contacted by a few constituents, you know, on this subject as well, and I had some thoughts about it, and I was thinking, and it was brought up that in other cases, when people run for state representative or the state senate or whatnot, and let me say, the office of mayor, in my opinion, is much more powerful than those. And although they can run, if there's an independent in the general election, and not get 50% of the vote, they will always come in at 48 or 49% or something like that. And whenever you're thinking of, there's so many candidates running, and we can elect to office that's so powerful that is somewhere in the 20 percentile range, you know, I can understand what some people are trying to work toward and what the public is thinking that, and the thing that, you know, they have a primary, people that run for state representative or the state senate, and then after it's filtered through, like I said, it's always at least 50% or more, or at least 49 or something. But the thing is, and of course there's the cost or whatnot. I think if this election, that if we had the first election in August that's already set up for the primaries, the county general, and we did that at that time, and that person, that council member or the mayor that did not get 50% of the vote, and then came back in November, that ballot is, then that election is already going to take place, and at that point they had to run off if they did not come up with the 50% of the vote. Those elections are already there. But certainly, the constituents that called me, they indicated that they had some concerns about mayors, not just this mayor, but in the past, you know, having 30% of the vote or whatnot. But I would like to make an amendment to change the times from August and then for the first vote, and then November to the 2nd, if I may.
Mr. Red, you are allowed to speak because you're on the list, and there's a question called for to cease discussion on the motion. And so there's a motion on the floor to cease discussion. And the reason that you were able to speak because you were on the list, and so you were able to speak because of that.
Well, my button was pressed before then. I would have made, but I have to wait till my turn to come around. Before that motion was made, my button was pressed here. And I think that motion would take precedence anyway.
Okay, what's your motion again, Mr. Ed?
To change the dates from the August primary county general for the election of the city council and the mayor, those not receiving at least 50% of the vote would then go in November at the county
And
city
seconded by Mr.
general.
Harris. There's a motion on the floor. Mr. Summers, you want to talk about the motion?
Yes, sir. Having run twice and got smart voters out there, there is still a lot of confusion. If you're going to run the city with the county, even with them being separated, I don't know how many questions I got that were related to the county. People thought they done voted for me in the August election. I think some of y'all had put out signs before the election and had them yanked up after the August election. Some of the voters have trouble deciding which issue is which. Now, if you're going to get voted for and blamed or given credit, whichever way it goes, I think you need to be clear-cut and avoid as much confusion as possible, because there are, even now, I get questions that are stuff that are really county issues, and I send them off to the county commissioner that's responsible for that, and vice versa. I get calls from the county commissioner, well, I think this is a city issue right here. I think you're muddying the water when you run both of us together on that, and I just couldn't support that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Summers. I just need to remind us that you're discussing the motion on the floor to change the dates only. That's all you can talk about. Mr. Harris?
Yes, ma'am. I think it's a great idea. That's what the discussion was on Thursday, and I was hoping that it came forward that way, because that would definitely minimize the cost if it was done that way. In reference to citizens not knowing who they're voting for, I think we need to give them an opportunity. We're not here to decide their knowledge of could they do it or not. I think we need to afford them the opportunity to decide that, and I think by putting everybody on the same ballot would be fine. I don't think that would be an issue.
Okay, thank you. Okay, there's a motion on the floor to change the dates to August dates, and that's what you're going to be voting on. You're only going to be voting on the amendment that's offered by Mr. Red to change the dates to August date. Please press your selection. Yes, you want to change the date to the August date. You're not, now let me make sure. Yeah, August, November. You're not voting on the motion, on the resolution. You're voting on the amendment only. So yes to change the date to August, November, no, and move on to Resolution 17. Okay, that motion fails. You have Resolution 17 in front of you. There's a question been called for. Those in favor of ceasing discussion, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Thank you. Someone opposed, Wallace? Yeah. Okay, there's a motion on the floor, Resolution 17, requesting to change to 50% plus one vote. If you want to support the resolution that states that it would require a 50% plus one vote to get someone elected, vote yes. If you're against it, vote no. Please press your button. No for yes to approve it, no to disapprove it. Okay, motion fails. Okay. Resolution 18, Ms. McLaughlin.
Okay, Resolution 18 is the renaming of Fairgrounds Park.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry. Okay. Resolution 18 is the renaming of Fairgrounds Park and the naming of the structure on the Cumberland River at the water entrance of the Clarksville Marina. And the recommendation of the Designations Committee is that the Fairgrounds Park will be renamed Liberty Park, and the structure on the Cumberland River at the entrance of the Clarksville Marina will be called Freedom Point. And before I put that in the form of a motion, there was an editorial in the paper yesterday and also 2 letters to the editor in the paper today claiming that we did not take into consideration the names that were submitted by the public. And everybody has a copy of those names. There's approximately 130 names. And on the first page, approximately the 15th name down is the suggestion of Clarksville Liberty Park. So I'd like to make a motion for approval of renaming Fairgrounds Park Liberty Park, and the structure at the entrance of Clarksville Marina, Freedom Point.
And second, any discussion about the naming? Mr. Summers?
I actually got more discussions on this than I did the runoff. And I guess the discussions with me, that were conducted with me, and I have to agree with them, it seems like the river area, we have tried to put a label on so it's easily identifiable, it relates to the area, you understand what it is. An example is, it's the River Walk. Our signs say the River District. It's going to be Clarksville Marina. Liberty Park, and this was the general way most discussion was, doesn't identify that that's a river feature or that's something that's associated with all of that down there. And I would have to, and I'm not knocking Liberty. I mean, I'm retired military. I'm all red, white, and blue on that. But as I pondered through the list here, there's about 36 references to the word river somewhere in the title. And I think with us doing River Walk, Marina, River District, I think the name ought to have river in it somewhere. I don't care if it's Cumberland River Park or just River Park or what it is, but somehow it seems like we jumped out in left field. And I'm not knocking the committee. Been on plenty of committees and been whacked on them. But it just doesn't seem to go with everything else we've tried to identify with the river down there.
Well, I think that,
I guess you can. Let me see here. Give me just a second. Okay, go ahead and speak loudly.
we all know that the marina is going to be called Clarksville Marina. That's what Greg Bax determined that the name of that would be, and it would be presented as, Clarksville Marina at Liberty Park. So, I understand where you're coming from.
Okay, Candy Johnson?
I was just gonna say, had Liberty River Park been considered? He said add river in there somewhere.
I think what you have in front of you is a recommendation of the designation committee. That's their recommendation. You need to vote it up or down. Okay, Barbara Johnson?
Yes, Mayor, I don't want to knock what this committee has done, and they've worked on it hard, but Liberty Park, we got Wings of Liberty coming right out there on Tiny Town Road, right across from, on Fort Campbell Boulevard, right across from Tiny Town Road. And I don't think Liberty would be a good name, since we're gonna have Wings of Liberty Library there, museum. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Mr. Summers?
You said we could either vote it up or down. If we voted it down, then we're stuck with nothing again, and we're back at ground zero.
By your own ordinance, you've requested to set up a designation committee for everything to come through the designation committee.
I understand. Can I make a motion for another name and throw it up for a vote? If that fails, then we...
You're bypassing your own rule. It was set up so that everything would be a clearinghouse through your designation committee. Who else on your committee?
Bill Forster, Gina Gross, myself, was Missy Grant, she's going to be replaced by Christie, Tommy Murphy from the street department, and Jennifer Meyer from the parks.
You set them up to make recommendations to you. Now, you're welcome to do anything you want to do.
Yeah, I'm going to make a motion for another name.
Okay, there's okay, now, sir, what, do you want this, would you like to vote on this? It might pass. And then, there's a motion on the floor and duly seconded. Is there any other discussion about naming the park Liberty Park? If not, vote yes for Liberty Park, no against it. There's a motion on the floor. There's a motion on the floor to accept Liberty Park. If it passes, then you have Liberty Park. If it fails, but the majority has voted for it. Yeah, if it passed, that's the way the democratic process works. Okay, as chairman of the committee, would you like to accept a friendly amendment?
Well, I'll ask Lance, I mean, you're the parliamentarian.
Well, it'd be a friendly amendment. It's up to you to accept his amendment.
Well, I mean, I don't see why to not. I mean, we've been accepting amendments all night.
Well, it's a little different. So, okay, Mr. Summers, I'm sorry to confuse. I just thought you have a committee set up for it. And so what's your motion? Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second? Okay, so let's see here. You're making a motion to amend her motion that was Liberty Park, and your motion is to delete Liberty Park and accept Cumberland River Park. Okay, that's the motion. Would you? Yes, ma'am. You're on.
Are you also wanting to amend the name of the structure? Because it's in one resolution together. The glass pavilion? Okay.
I would just, I've not said much tonight on these things. I've let y'all debate them. I think Liberty Park was selected. I did not have anything to do with it, so we'll say that up front. But I think, from what I understand, it was selected from the appreciation of Fort Campbell. I think the connection to Fort Campbell, Liberty Park, Freedom Point, is that right? Mm-hmm. Freedom Point. And I think it was the military connection that was there. And I sure hate to say this, but I think from conversation I had, the word Cumberland may have been overused in our community a little bit. Trying to rebrand our community, rebrand our naming, and a new marketing scheme and theme for Clarksville. That's all I want to say. There's a motion on the floor. Any other discussion? I got Mr. Red.
I would ask to vote against the amendment as well. I like that Liberty part.
Yeah.
Instead of the Cumberland. I've heard Cumberland so much since I've lived here too.
Okay. Let me get one more. Mr. Lewis, and then
I just want to say, I don't see the point to have this committee if we're not going to support the committee.
okay. Yeah. Okay. Mr. Harris, and we'll end it there. Mr. Harris.
Well, I must say, I wasn't on that committee, but I do sit on this committee as a councilman, so I do feel, and I agree with Mr. Summers, if something comes from a committee that we disagree with, it's our obligation, our duty to speak, and so Mr. Summers, I definitely support you on it.
Thank you very much. What you have in front of you is a motion to name your park Cumberland River Park. Please, yes to name it, ma'am? Well, they've amended it. So if you want to vote for Cumberland River Park, vote yes. If you do not want to vote for that and vote for something else, vote no. Yes for Cumberland River Park, no, you don't want it. Please vote. Okay, motion fails. I think what you, ma'am? Okay, what you just voted, what was just voted by the council was to not accept the Cumberland River Park as a name designation. You now have on the floor a motion by Ms. McLaughlin from the Designation Committee to name the park Liberty Park. The vote is 7-5 against it. I'm sorry, y'all. Maybe you want to talk to your county clerk, your city clerk. Would you take care of that? Yeah, it's getting pretty late. Yes, ma'am. The vote was 7 no's. Ms. McLaughlin, Mr. Lewis, Mr. Red, Candy Johnson, Mr. Grubbs, Mr. Forrester, Mr. Burkhart voted no. Voted against that. So it's not going to be Cumberland River Park. Now you have a motion on the floor to name it Liberty Park. If there's another name that you would suggest to go through the same process, now would be the time to do that. Are there any amendments to the motions on the floor?
I call for the question of the main question.
Thank you. Question of the main question. Second. Those in favor of cease discussion, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay. Now you're going to vote yes for Liberty Park, no if you don't want it. Please vote. We've overloaded the system. Yeah, I think my system is too. Okay, then that one's approved. Thank you for your input, Mr. Summers. Okay. Ms. McLaughlin, you're up next.
Okay, I need authorization to consider resolution 19, which would be the proposed name for the Rails to Trails project.
Motion, and you're offering a second? Okay. So she's asking to be able to discuss Resolution 19 requires a three-quarter majority vote. Please press your selection if you want to discuss Resolution 19. Yes to discuss it, no not to discuss it. Is it two-thirds or three-fourths? 10, yes, sir. Okay, Mr. Harris? Okay, so you're on. Would you like to make a motion, Ms. McLaughlin?
Yeah, I make a motion to approve resolution 19, the meaning of the Rails to Trails project as Clarksville Greenways.
So, any discussion on Resolution 19? Please, Candy Johnson?
Just have a question. Did a committee come up with that name as well?
Yeah, actually, it was brought to us from Daniel Binkley. You know, he's one of the projects managers for the city, did a lot of research on it, and he's been working on the trail. And one of the first trains that traveled on that rail bed was called the Clarksville. And him and Miss Williams actually found a picture of it. And the word greenways means, you know, a nature setting inside of an urban area. So that's how that name came about. Also, Missy Graham, our Parks and Rec director, mentioned that we had a greenways master plan, so this ties into that as well.
Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? Mr. Ed?
I'd just like to thank Ms. McLaughlin, Council A. McLaughlin, for serving on those committees. She did a good job for her spending all that time on those committees.
I think she needs to buy us all a pizza after this, is what I think.
Well, I'm going home.
Yeah.
It's
I
past
kind
my
of meant that we
bedtime.
should buy her the pizza.
Oh, you do?
so-
Gee, thanks. Okay, any other questions or comments on Resolution 19? Please press your selection. Yes to approve Clarksville Greenways, no not to.
Okay, there it is.
Okay, that is approved, Resolution 19. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Grubbs would like to address us.
Just want to make an announcement, or not an announcement, just encourage everybody to go out on Saturday and support Austin Peay. It's a rugby football game, they'll be tailgating, the game's at 6, and, you know, support the team and Coach Christopher. I think they're gonna have a good year. I can remember that. Oh, yeah,
Sir?
we're working on our boat Saturday.
Oh, on Saturday, Bill? Where? Bill's house on the boat. Ms. McLaughlin?
I was just going to remind everybody that Riverfest is September 11th and 12th. The event kicks off at 5 p.m. on Friday, September 11th at McGregor Park with a September 11th remembrance ceremony.
Okay, just two final things, if you'd allow me to. I'd like to remind everyone of the newly named Clarksville Greenways grand opening, September the 26th of this month. You would get there by driving to the end of Pollard Road. There's going to be an event planned at 10 o'clock that morning. I think it's going to be something that each of you should attend, and I think it's going to be something that you're going to be very pleased with, and I certainly believe that the community is going to be pleased with all of the work that's been done. And finally, it's with sadness that I tell you tonight that Missy Graham is going to be leaving us September the 18th. And I want to say to Missy publicly how much we appreciate you took a department that was in great need of management and leadership, and you certainly took it with dignity and respect and honor, and deserve and receive the respect of the entire department. On my part, and behalf of the City Council, thank you for a great job you've done. We appreciate the way you moved that department forward. We're going to look forward to having an event for her before she leaves. I would like to ask you to come. So thank you, Missy, for all the work you've done.
Thank you, Missy.
Okay. Thank you very much. We stand adjourned.
Yes.